Chapter 3389. Chapter 3384. Demonic Sword Boom. High up in the sky, Merciless held a black long sword in his hand. It had a strange shape and was emitting a terrifying demonic aura. The pressure caused the void to tremble. At this moment, everyone felt an intense pressure. Their expressions changed as their eyes locked onto the black sword in Merciless' hand. That sword is so terrifying. How can it release such a powerful demonic aura? That sword is too strange. It's as if there's an endless amount of demonic aura sealed within it. Merciless can actually control such a terrifying demonic sword. He's too powerful. The crowd discussed among themselves as they looked at Merciless with unconcealable fear. The black longsword in Merciless' hand gave off an intense pressure that made people shudder. Humph! Absolute Eagle King looked at Li Jin from afar and sneered. A little ant actually dares to challenge Merciless. He's really courting death. Brother Absolute, could that sword be? At the side, Gui Tongren looked at Absolute Eagle King and seemed to realize something terrifying. His eyes suddenly trembled, and he was so scared that he couldn't finish his sentence. That's right. Absolute Eagle King's gaze swept across Gui Tongren, his face cold as he nodded. It's really... Gui Tongren's eyes narrowed again. His expression stiffened, and he couldn't say a word. He was a swordsman at the ninth heaven of Saint. What exactly was that demonic sword to make him so afraid? First Guardian, could that black sword be? On the other side, eternally Merciless stood beside Zhong Mingyu. His eyes trembled as he looked at Zhong Mingyu in horror. Even his voice was trembling. Yes, Zhong Mingyu was also shocked, but he still maintained his composure. He nodded and said, Demonic Sword of Seven Despair. It's really the demonic sword of Seven Despair. Eternally Merciless' expression darkened. He had already expected it when he felt the powerful demonic aura within the demonic sword. But when he confirmed it from Zhong Mingyu, he was still shocked. The Seven Extinction Devil Sword. The palace-shaking sword of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace. It was rumored that the first master of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace, the Seven Extinction Devil Ancestor, had sealed the vengeful souls of billions of living beings into a piece of the Devil Dragon Valiant Bone, finally forging a peerless devil weapon, the Seven Extinction Devil Sword. Ancestor Qi Jue had once wielded the Seven Extinction Demon Sword and defeated countless powerful enemies. However, after the fall of the Seven Absolute Devil Ancestor, no one in the Seven Absolute Devil Palace was able to control the Seven Absolute Devil Sword. This was because the vengeful spirit energy and demonic dragon energy in the sword were too strong for ordinary people to control. It was exactly because of this that the status of the Demon Palace of Seven Despair fell again and again. In the end, it was reduced to a medium-sized organization in the All Heaven Saints world. Who would have thought that after the fall of the Qijue ancestor, another person who could control the Qijue demonic sword would appear? At this moment, Heartless held the Seven Despair demon sword in his hand. It was as if a demon had descended. Demonic chi surged all over his body. His entire person was like an abyss of demonic chi that could devour everything. Eternally Merciless was stunned for a few seconds. His eyes trembled as he asked nervously, First Guardian, do you think Li Jin can withstand a blow from the Seven Despair demon sword? Zhong Mingyu frowned and said solemnly, I hope he can survive after one blow from the sword. His words were very clear. Li Jin could only withstand one blow from the Seven Despair demon sword at most. After one blow, Li Jin would be very lucky to survive. Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled, and he did not speak anymore. The aura of that sword is too terrifying. Nie Tian looked at Heartless from afar. He frowned and was secretly worried. He had never seen a sword that could release such terrifying demonic chi energy. Your sword. At the same time, high up in the sky, Li Jin looked at the Seven Despair demon sword in Heartless' hands. His eyes trembled, and his expression was very ugly. He was tens of thousands of meters away from Heartless, but he could feel waves of terrifying demonic chi rushing towards him. It made him feel like he was suffocating. He did not dare to imagine how Heartless could withstand the pressure of the 7 Despair Demon Sword's demonic chi. "Are you afraid?" Heartless smiled coldly. The corner of his mouth was cold. The murderous aura around his body rumbled continuously. His entire person was very violent. Li Jin frowned and calmed down a little. He was indeed afraid. However, once the words left his mouth, there was no way for him to retreat. He could only fight. "Make your move," Li Jin roared. Sword will gushed out of his body. Waves of fiery sword will rolled in the air. The scorching aura rushed into the void as if it wanted to burn the heaven and earth. "Die," Zhu Qing sneered coldly, after which his silhouette flickered, causing the entire space to tremble. On top of the 7 Extinction Demon Sword, a boundless black, demonic flame was emitted. A terrifying demonic chi filled the entire space. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying demonic flame sword shadow appeared. Like a violent demonic dragon, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws. It covered the sky and covered the earth. It was so oppressive that the demonic flame made a loud noise as if it wanted to burn everything. In the blink of an eye, the entire heaven and earth turned into a sea of flames. The scorching aura caused the entire heaven and earth to burn. Li Jin frowned. He directly ignited his chi and forcefully slashed out with his sword. A fiery sword shadow howled. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the 2 demonic flames collided. The heaven and earth shook. Tongues of flames rushed out like wild beasts, as if they wanted to devour the entire heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. The crimson-red flames and the black demonic flame clashed and swallowed each other, turning the entire heaven and earth into a boundless purgatory. Everyone felt the impact of the flames, and they all retreated, especially the black demonic flame released by Heartless. It contained a terrifyingly strong chi that suffocated everyone. The eyes of the crowd trembled. They didn't think that Li Jin would be so strong that he could fight against Heartless head-on. Bang! However, at that moment, in the space that was filled with flames, a muffled sound rang out. Then, a silhouette was flung out, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Li Jin, Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He clearly saw that the bloody silhouette was Li Jin. After all, Li Jin was no match for Heartless. Li Jin was a swordsman of the fire attribute. However, his sword was obviously not as strong as Heartless, and was countered by his opponent. In addition, Heartless had the demonic Sword of Sevens, which made it even harder for him to fight back. However, Li Jin's silhouette stabilized in the air. His eyes trembled, and his breathing was a little unstable. Phew! Zhong Mingyu and the rest looked at Li Jin from afar and let out a long sigh. At least Li Jin's life was saved. At that moment, Heartless' silhouette stepped out of the flames. He sneered and said, "You little ant, you are quite capable. You actually survived under my demonic Sword of Sevens." "I admit defeat." Li Jin frowned and said unwillingly. He originally thought that even if he couldn't defeat Heartless, he could at least fight with him. He didn't expect that he couldn't even block one move from Heartless. "Brother Li." At that moment, Nye Tian came to Li Jin's side and faintly smiled. He channeled the power of the vein of the earth into the latter to help him stabilize his breathing. "Brother Nye, I'm sorry to disappoint you." Li Jin's expression turned slightly better. He looked at Nye Tian and said with a bitter smile. Chapter 3390. Battle of the 2 Dragons. After Nye Tian finished speaking, he took a step forward. His aura surged out crazily, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Nye Tian, he's going to make a move. Everyone's eyes trembled, and their expressions became heated as they waited for the moment when Nye Tian would make a move. Nye Tian had killed Yang Bingxian before, and now that he had merged with the Heart of the Sky, his strength had increased a lot. He should be able to fight against Heartless. If he couldn't even beat Heartless, how could he talk about the upcoming battle between Gue Jiaozi and Junzue Ji? Zhong Mingyu looked at Nye Tian, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He suddenly became nervous. He didn't know how strong Nye Tian was right now, and he didn't expect Nietian to defeat Heartless and the others. He only hoped that Nietian could survive. If Nietian's life was threatened, he would definitely make a move. Nietian, it's your turn. Heartless smiled coldly, and the demonic flames on his body became even more violent. It was as if 10,000 demons were dancing wildly, and the impact caused the void to rumble endlessly. Come. Nietian smiled faintly as his eyes darkened slightly. A terrifying sword aura surged out from his body and actually caused the space around him to sink. Immediately, the rolling devilish flames around him began to disperse. Very good, Heartless shouted, and the 7 extinction demonic sword slashed through the void. A terrifying demonic chi was released, and the demonic flames in the air became even more violent, as if they wanted to burn everything. Brother Jew, do you think this brat called Nietian can block the 7 extinction demonic sword? In the distant void, Gue Tongrin's eyes turned, and a playful expression appeared on his face. He suddenly looked at Jueying King and asked, "Humph." Jueying King sneered and said, "The 7 extinction demonic sword was forged by the founding ancestor of the 7 extinction demonic palace. Besides the founding ancestor, Heartless is the only one who can control it. Although that kid called Nietian is very strange, I am sure that under the 7 extinction demonic sword, he won't last more than 3 moves." 3 moves? Gue Tong's eyes slightly narrowed. He let out a strange laugh and no longer spoke. He was an astute person. Although Extreme Eagle King spoke resolutely, he could hear a trace of worry. If Jueying King had enough confidence in Heartless and the 7 extinction demonic sword, why would he say 3 moves? It seemed like the Extreme Eagle King was already afraid of Nietian. Gue Jiaozi and Junzue Ji were watching from afar like tigers eyeing their prey. To be honest, they didn't want Nietian to be defeated or killed by Heartless. If that happened, they wouldn't have a chance to make a move. To them, the best outcome would be for Nietian and Heartless to fight until both sides were heavily injured. Then, Nietian would continue to accept their challenges. However, they felt that Nietian shouldn't be a match for Heartless. Gue Jiaozi knew that Heartless' strength lay not only in his 7 extinction demonic sword, but also in his eyes. Whether or not Nietian could block the 7 extinction demonic sword was unknown, not to mention those eyes. At this time, the eyes of the crowd were trembling and their expressions were not very good. Clearly, they were worried for Nietian. Even though Nietian was strong, the opponent he was facing was even stronger. 7 extinction demonic dragon kill. At this time, Heartless roared and his figure instantly moved. The 7 extinction demonic sword wildly slashed out. A resplendent sword light appeared and cut through the sky, leaving a trail of flames in the air. Roar! In the next moment, endless sword intent and demonic flames condensed together. A huge demonic flame dragon appeared and roared in the air. The dragon's roar shook the heavens and the earth. It carried a terrifying destructive power and crazily pressed towards Nietian. How terrifying! This scene made the eyes of the crowd tremble, and they directly cried out in alarm. At this moment, the power that Heartless displayed was even more terrifying than the sword that defeated Li Jin. Obviously, he didn't treat Li Jin as a real opponent. At this moment, facing Nietian, he revealed his true strength. Boom! The demonic dragon's power shook the heavens and the earth, oppressing the void. Demonic flames appeared in the void, turning the heavens and the earth into a sea of flames, wanting to burn Nietian to death directly. Niet Tianling stood in the void and slightly frowned. On the surface, Heartless looked arrogant, but in reality, he was very careful. He didn't underestimate Nietian at all. His first move was such a terrifying sword move. Boom! In the next moment, Nietian's eyes slightly narrowed. His body shook, and a violent dragon aura surged out of his body. In the sea of dragon aura behind him, a huge red dragon appeared. Its huge body rolled out, and suddenly, a terrifying dragon aura rushed out, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Dragon aura. The eyes of the crowd trembled as they felt the violent dragon aura rushing towards them. They immediately cried out in alarm. No one would have thought that Nietion's body actually contained such a huge amount of dragon aura. Nietion wanted to use the power of the supreme dragon bloodline to resist the 7 extinction demonic sword. Roar dash! Roar dash! In the void, the 2 dragons roared. The surrounding space trembled crazily, as if the heavens and the earth were about to collapse. Nietion's supreme dragon bloodline released the most terrifying dragon aura, and Heartless 7 extinction demonic sword was forged from the bones of the demonic dragon. It also contained the terrifying demonic dragon aura. Under the influence of the 2 dragon auras, the space became very fragile. The crowd frantically retreated once again as they looked at the scene in the void with a horrified expression. Boom! At this moment, the Crimson Dragon and the blazing Demon Dragon collided with each other. An explosive sound rang out. Immediately, a terrifying dragon chi was released, and the destructive power caused the space within tens of thousands of meters to collapse with a loud bang. Boom, 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 crack, crack, crack. In the void, terrifying rumbles and the sound of space collapsing resounded. Waves of violent energy clashed together, forming a terrifying, strangling power that seemed to want to destroy everything. The void was chaotic, as if it was the end of the world. Nietion and Heartless figures were completely engulfed by the sea of light. King Juing, Zhong Mingyu, and the rest of the experts were shocked. Their eyes trembled. It was hard to imagine that the battle scene in front of them was created by 2 young martial artists. After a long time, the violent energy in the void gradually dissipated. 2 figures appeared in the sky above the crowd. Nie Tianling stood in the void. His eyes were as calm as water, but they were sharp. As for Heartless, his face was gloomy and there was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. In the battle between the 2 dragons, Heartless had actually lost. Under that level of impact, Nietion's strength did not gain any advantage. However, his martial physique had become his greatest advantage. Although Heartless' realm was stronger than Nietion's, his martial physique was weaker than Nietion's. Nietion could withstand the same attack, but Heartless might not be able to. Everyone saw Nietion and Heartless figures clearly. Their eyes trembled violently, and they were momentarily speechless. No one would have thought that after a fight, the one who was injured was actually Heartless. How is this possible? King Juing's eyes suddenly trembled as he cried out in alarm. His entire body was stunned, and his face was as ugly as it could be. The scene in front of him was something he had never expected. Gue Tongren's mouth twitched as he had a gloating expression. Of course, he did not wish for Nietion to die at Heartless' hands. That way, there would be no chance for Gue Jiaozi to perform. Nietion. However, at this moment, Heartless suddenly took a step forward. He raised his arm and placed it on top of the eye mask. Nietion frowned, and his heart could not help but sink. Chapter 3391. The Demon Dragons. You're finally going to use your other eye, Nietion said as he looked cold at Heartless. He had already realized that Heartless' eyes were extraordinary, so the scene before him did not surprise him too much. Nietion, your strength has exceeded my expectations. But that doesn't matter. It won't change the result, Heartless said coldly, enunciating each word with a murderous intent. He slowly took off his eye patch, revealing a pair of eyes as dark as the night. Boom! At that moment, the void suddenly exploded. Everyone seemed to see a pair of huge, evil eyes appear behind Heartless. It flashed for a moment and disappeared. It was extremely strange. Nietion frowned, and his expression changed. He could feel that Heartless' eyes contained a terrifying dragon chi. The dragon chi was even stronger and more terrifying than the chi of the demon dragon on the 7 Despair demon sword. How could this be? Nietion was shocked and very confused. He had clearly sensed the aura of the eye power in Heartless' eyes, but now, His eyes were releasing such a terrifying dragon chi. Nyetian, this guy's eyes are not other eyes. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice suddenly sounding very surprised. If it's not other eyes, then what is it? Nyetian frowned, his face full of shock. It's the demon dragon's eye. The Ghost Emperor paused for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "The demon dragon's eye?" Nyetian was stunned, and his expression became even more confused. Could it be that Heartless' eyes were not the eyes of a human, but the eyes of a dragon? "It is the demon dragon's eye." The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, "His eyes are not his original eyes. They should be the demon dragon's eye that was transplanted when he was young. It really is a dragon's eye." Nyetian's eyes trembled, and his heart was extremely shocked. He had never thought that Heartless' eyes would be the demon dragon's eye. Nyetan, the demonic dragon, is a powerhouse of the Sage Realm Dragon clan. The Heartless demonic dragon's eyes should have come from the primordial demonic dragon king. The Ghost Emperor's face sank. "I don't know what kind of power those eyes contain. You must be careful." Nyetian nodded. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. This kid actually fused with the eye of the demon dragon. In the distance, Gue Tongren looked at Merciless and exclaimed in shock. After a long time, he finally understood and said with a trembling voice, "No wonder he can control the 7 extinction evil swords. It was because of the demonic dragon eye." "Brother Gue, are you surprised to see the demonic dragon's eye?" Absolute Eagle King sneered. He glanced at Gue Tongrun and said coldly, "Heartless, open the demon dragon eye. I want to see how long this Nyebrak can last." The eye of the demon dragon. This was Heartless' greatest trump card. It was precisely because of the existence of the demonic dragon eye that Heartless was able to withstand the demonic chi pressure of the 7 demise demonic sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to control the 7 extinction evil swords. "Oh no!" Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled, and he cried out in his heart. His face was filled with unconcealable nervousness. He never thought that Heartless would have the eye of the demon dragon. Nyetian could defeat Heartless with the 7 extinction evil swords, but it was absolutely impossible for him to defeat Heartless with the eye of the demon dragon. "Nyetian, this is the first time I used the eye of the demon dragon. I didn't expect it to be used on a swordsman whose strength is far inferior to mine." High up in the sky, Heartless' voice sounded. "You should feel extremely honored to die with the eye of the demon dragon." When Heartless was young, in order to fuse with the eye of the demon dragon, he personally gouged out his own eyes. After experiencing unimaginable pain, he finally succeeded in making the eye of the demon dragon his own eyes. Usually, he always wore an eye mask to protect the eye of the demon dragon. He had experienced countless life and death battles, but he had never used the eye of the demon dragon. He didn't expect that the first time he used the eye of the demon dragon would be on a swordsman with a transcendent profoundness. It had to be said that Nyetian's strength was far beyond his expectations. It even made him very afraid. However, everything had come to an end. Since he used the eye of the demon dragon, it meant that there was only one ending for Nyetian: death. "Is that so?" At this time, Nyetian looked at Heartless and laughed coldly. There was not the slightest fear in his eyes. Instead, there was cold contempt in his eyes. At this time, there was only one thought in Nyetian's mind: end the battle quickly. He had already used the Supreme Dragon Vein on Heartless, so he didn't want to continue wasting time with Heartless. His opponents were not just Heartless. He still had to fight Gue Jiaozi and Jun Zueji. If he consumed too much power on Heartless, it would be very difficult to defeat Gue Jiaozi and Jun Zueji. Everyone looked at Nyetian. They didn't understand why the latter could still be so calm, and even looked down on Heartless. "Nyetian, nothing must happen to you." Zhong Mingyu looked at Nyetian from afar and said in his heart. He had already made up his mind to attack. If Nyetian was in danger, he would directly attack. "Nyetian, you're courting death." At this time, Heartless was instantly enraged by Nyetian's contempt. He roared and his eyes flickered. Suddenly, a dark and boundless dragon chi appeared and roared out. It was very terrifying. In an instant, the void within hundreds of thousands of meters fell into darkness as if night had fallen. Nietian felt the demon dragon chi in the surrounding space. His eyes narrowed slightly and the corner of his mouth twitched. His entire person seemed cold and evil. Die. The next moment, in the dark void, heartless roar sounded, and then a huge and boundless dark dragon chi was released. A huge dark demon dragon that was tens of thousands of meters long drilled out of the void, and the oppressive space wailed. Everyone's eyes trembled. They could only see the boundless darkness, but they couldn't see what was happening in the darkness. Even experts like Zhong Mingyu couldn't penetrate the dark dragon chi. They could only watch and feel the power fluctuations in the void. Zhong Mingyu's divine sense locked onto Nietian. He didn't dare to be careless. At this time, he suddenly felt a dark power surging from Nietian's body. It seemed to be some kind of eye power, which made his face change in surprise. He didn't know that Nietian was a cultivator with other pupils. After a long time, the dark void gradually became clear. The figures of Nietian and Heartless slowly appeared in everyone's vision. High up in the sky, Nietianling stood as sharp as a sword. As for Heartless, his whole body was dripping with blood. His body was trembling and swaying, and he couldn't hold on any longer. How can this be? The eyes of the crowd trembled and they exclaimed. Their faces were full of disbelief. No one thought that Heartless would be defeated again in the battle with Nietian after activating the Demon Dragon Eye. Everyone's expression was sluggish. They looked at Nietian in horror, shocked to the extreme. No one knew how Nietian defeated Heartless. Your eyes, why? At this time, Heartless opened his mouth. His pair of eyes trembled as he looked at Nietian, but he couldn't speak. Chapter 3392. Tianwu's Sacred Order. Heartless, you have the Demon Dragon's Eye, but I have the other pupil. Nietian looked at Heartless, smiled faintly, and said, Unfortunately, your demonic dragon's eye is not as powerful as my other pupil. Other pupil. Nietian used the Devil's Eye and activated the Extreme Devil Exterminating Seal to defeat Heartless. The Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal pierced through the demon dragon formed by the demon dragon's eye and pierced through Heartless' chest. It was a fatal blow. Heartless' eyes trembled. He wanted to say something, but the life force in his body was rapidly draining away, rendering him speechless. Blood-red marks appeared on his body. These were the injuries caused by the Extreme Devil Annihilation Mark. Heartless. At this time, the Absolute Eagle King finally reacted and let out a shrill scream. Bang! However, just as he finished speaking, Heartless' body suddenly trembled, and he actually exploded in the air, dripping with blood. The eyes of the crowd trembled violently. Horror was written all over their faces. Nobody would have thought that Heartless actually died just like that. Zhu Qing, the peerless genius of the Seven Extinction Devil Palace, the only swordsman who could control the Seven Extinction Devil Sword in millions of years, was dead. Such a shocking scene was something that no one had expected. Just how powerful was Nietian? Just what kind of terrifying power was hidden in his body? The shockingly talented Heartless still died in the hands of Nietian in the end. While everyone was still in shock, Nietian's figure flashed across the sky. He stopped, and a pair of pitch-black eyes and a black longsword appeared in his hands. They were the eyes of the demonic dragon and the seven ultimate demonic sword. The eye of the demonic dragon and the seven ultimate demonic sword. Everyone's eyes widened as they cried out in surprise. They stared at Nietian with their eyes wide open. Nietian directly took down Heartless Demonic Dragon's eye and seven ultimate demonic sword. It wasn't strange that Nietian could obtain the Demon Dragon's Eye, but how could he hold the seven ultimate demon sword? Heartless was able to control the seven Extinction Devil Swords because he possessed the eyes of the Demon Dragon. However, Nietian hadn't fused with the Demonic Dragon's Eye, so how could he resist the demonic chi of the seven ultimate demonic sword? Nietian, Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled as he looked at Nietian in horror, not knowing what to say. In that instant, he sensed the ripples of I bloodline power in Niet Tion's body, and he was extremely shocked. But he did not expect that Niet Tion could actually kill Heartless so easily. The power displayed by Niet Tion far exceeded his expectations. Brat, leave behind the demonic dragon's eye and the 7 ultimate demonic sword. At this moment, a violent roar rang out as a silhouette appeared. In an instant, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky, gushing towards Niet Tion. Niet Tion frowned and instantly retreated. But that power was too terrifying. It pressed down on the sky, and there was no way to avoid it. Not good. The sudden scene caused Zhong Mingyu's eyes to tremble as he exclaimed. He did not expect that the Absolute Eagle King would actually directly attack Niet Tion at this moment. But at this moment, it was already too late for him to make a move. Boom! Just at the moment of life and death, a sword shadow suddenly broke through the air and tore open a part of the sky. Niet Tion's eyes flickered, and his figure nimbly dodged, avoiding the fatal blow. It's you. He steadied himself and turned around. What entered his eyes made his eyes tremble as he exclaimed in surprise. At this critical moment, the person who saved him was actually Yang Gungri. This was something that Niet Tion did not expect at all. There was a deep-seated hatred between Yang Gungri and Niet Tion. Why would he come to Niet Tion's rescue at this moment? Niet Tion had killed his son and grandson. He should be itching to skin Niet Tion alive. Why would he save Niet Tion? Niet Tion, the grudge between us is written off. Yang Gungri looked at Niet Tion with a dark expression and spoke in a low voice. Niet Tion frowned, confusion filling his face. Yang Gungri saved him just to reconcile with him? Could it be that Yang Gungri was afraid? That's right, Yang Gungri was afraid. The moment Niet Tion merged with the heart of the sky and became the Lord of the Sky, Yang Gungri was afraid. He knew that Niet Tion's future achievements would be limitless. At that moment, he began to search for an opportunity to reconcile with Niet Tion. He observed Zhong Mingyu several times, and the latter made a move. This undoubtedly meant that Niet Tion held an extremely important position in Zhong Mingyu's heart. Yang Gungri naturally knew Zhong Mingyu's identity. The latter had a powerful force supporting him. Zhong Mingyu's support meant that Niet Tion's future achievements would be unimaginable. Therefore, for the future of the Yang family, Yang Gungri gave up on avenging his son and even the eternal night demon fox just to reconcile with Niet Tion. Moreover, he knew that he had killed too many swordsmen in order to activate the eternal night burning god in the sky sword technique. If this matter was exposed, not only would he die, but the entire Yang family would be implicated. In order to leave the Yang family a way out, he had to save Niet Tion. The others looked at Yang Gungri, stunned. They could not react for a long time. You're courting death. At this moment, Absolute Eagle King suddenly looked at Yang Gungri and roared. He released his sword aura crazily, and his killing intent was heavy. However, at this moment, Zhong Mingyu's figure appeared. He stared at Absolute Eagle King cold and scolded. Absolute Eagle King, stop. Zhong Mingyu, if you don't show it, get out of my way. Absolute Eagle King was completely enraged. He roared and his eyes were extremely cold. Absolute Eagle King, if you take another step forward, the 7 ultimate demon palace will be doomed. Not only did Zhong Mingyu not retreat, but he also took a step forward and took out a token. Heavenly Martial Sacred Token. Absolute Eagle King's eyes narrowed when he saw the token. He exclaimed in shock, and his figure involuntarily took a few steps back. He had not expected Zhong Mingyu to take out the Heavenly Martial Sacred Token at this moment. He was very clear about what the Heavenly Martial Sacred Token meant. Absolute Eagle King, if you take another step forward, I guarantee that the entire 7 Ultimate Demon Palace will disappear. Zhong Mingyu said coldly. His eyes flashed with Absolute Eagle King's aura. Zhong Mingyu, get that kid to hand over the eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword. The 7 Ultimate Demon Palace will not pursue the matter of Zhu Qing's death, Absolute Eagle King said solemnly. Zhong Mingyu furrowed his brows and turned to look at Niet Tion. The eye of the demon dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword were the treasures of the 7 ultimate demon palace. It was not strange that Absolute Eagle King wanted them back. However, the problem was, would Nyetian return them to him? He wants me to return the eye of the demon dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword. Nyetian took a step forward and looked at Absolute Eagle King. He sneered and said, "Do you think that's possible? Brat, you..." Absolute Eagle King's eyes trembled. He suddenly felt a lump of anger in his chest, and he could not speak. Chapter 3393. Heaven Marshal Group. Absolute Eagle King was furious as he stared coldly at Nyetian, not daring to take a step forward. He had to be careful when facing the Heavenly Marshal's sacred token. If he wasn't careful, the 7 Despair Demon Palace would be destroyed. But the Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword were the treasures of the 7 Despair Demon Palace. How could he give them up? What about me? Nyetian looked at the Ultimate Eagle King with a faint smile, his face full of confidence. He could see the value of the Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword. These 2 treasures were already in his hands. How could he return them so easily? He didn't know what the Heavenly Marshal's sacred token was. But since Absolute Eagle King was so afraid of it, he would use it to devour the Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword. Nyetian, you must hand over the Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword today. King Solitary Eagle seemed to have calmed down a bit, but his eyes were still filled with killing intent as he stared fixedly at Nyetian. The Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword were the treasures of the 7 Despair Demon Palace. They couldn't be lost. It didn't matter if Zhu Qing died, but if the Demon Dragon Eye and the 7 Despair Demon Sword were lost, even if Absolute Eagle King returned to the 7 Despair Demon Palace, he would suffer a fate worse than death. What if I don't hand them over? Nyetian smiled faintly. With a mocking expression, he said, "Heartless was killed by me. Of course, his belongings should belong to me." "You're courting death." Absolute Eagle King roared. Sword aura rose from his body, causing the air to tremble. It was as though the sky was going to split apart. Nyetian was just a nobody, but he dared to covet the treasures of the 7 Despair Demon Palace. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? "Even if I am courting death, do you dare to kill me?" Nyetian smiled again. "Kid, do you think Zhong Mingyu can protect you?" Absolute Eagle King roared. At the same time, his gaze swept across Zhong Mingyu's body. If Zhong Mingyu didn't have the Heavenly Marshal's sacred token, he would have attacked already. What he was afraid of was not Zhong Mingyu, but the Heavenly Marshal's sacred order. Absolute Eagle King, think carefully. A Heavenly Marshal's sacred token is enough to destroy your 7 Despair Devil Palace. Zhong Mingyu frowned and said coldly when he felt the aura around Absolute Eagle King. Absolute Eagle King's face darkened even more. If he disobeyed the Heavenly Marshal's sacred decree, he might really bring disaster to the 7 Despair Devil Palace. However, if he couldn't bring back the Demon Dragon's Eye and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword, he would suffer a fate worse than death when he returned to the 7 Ultimate Demon Palace. It was as if the 2 choices were a dead end for him. "Zhong Mingyu, you should know what the Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Devil Sword mean to my 7 Ultimate Devil Palace." After thinking for a moment, the Absolute Eagle King looked cold at Zhong Mingyu and said, "If I lose the Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 Ultimate Demon Sword, do you think the Palace Master will let me live? I don't dare to disobey the heaven-defying martial saint order. But if you don't give me a way out, I can only fight to the death." Boom! After saying that, he took a step forward, and the sword intent in his body surged out like a raging wave. The sky and earth shook, and the wind and clouds changed color. No matter what, the Absolute Eagle King was a swordsman of the 9th heaven of holy doctrine. When his sword intent was completely released, the strength was unimaginable. Even Zhong Mingyu didn't have much of a chance of winning against the Absolute Eagle King. Previously, when he defeated the Absolute Eagle King and Gue Tongran, he used a loophole and used their strength to make them defeat each other. If he had a life and death battle with the Absolute Eagle King, it would be hard to say who would win. Zhong Mingyu frowned, and his expression was a little awkward. He turned to look at Nietan, but the latter was calm and had already kept the eye of the demon dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword. It was obvious that Niet Tian had no intention of handing over the eye of the demon dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword. Actually, Zhong Mingyu wanted Niet Tian to hand over the eye of the demon dragon and one of the 7 ultimate demon swords as an explanation to the absolute Eagle King. But now it didn't seem possible. Niet Tian's appetite was bigger than he had imagined. On the absolute Eagle King's side, it was also difficult. If he forced the absolute Eagle King too hard, he would definitely fight to the death. Absolute Eagle King. The Eye of the Demon Dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword were obtained by Niet Tian after he killed Zhu Qing. He has no reason to hand them over to you. After a moment, Zhong Mingyu took a deep breath and looked at the absolute Eagle King. What you are worried about is that after you return to the 7 ultimate demon palace, you won't be able to survive. I promise you, after the competition in the Sky, I will accompany you back to the 7 ultimate demon palace. I will definitely protect you. When the absolute Eagle King heard Zhong Mingyu's words, his expression darkened. He said cold, "Zhong Mingyu, you think too highly of yourself. With your strength, what right do you have to protect me? I can't protect you, but the Sky Marshal's sacred token can." Zhong Mingyu already knew that the absolute Eagle King would say this, and replied cold. Sky Marshal's sacred token. The absolute Eagle King's expression darkened. His gaze swept across the Sky Marshal sacred token, and his expression changed. With the power of the Sky Marshal sacred token, it could indeed protect his life. But this way, the 7 ultimate demon palace would lose 2 great treasures. Even if the 7 ultimate demon palace master didn't pursue the matter for the time being, what about in the future? The absolute Eagle King knew very well what kind of person the 7 ultimate demon palace master was. He had seen the 7 ultimate demon palace master's ruthless methods too many times. No. Thinking of this, the absolute Eagle King's expression darkened. He roared cold and looked at Niet Tian. You must hand over the eye of the demon dragon and the 7 ultimate demon sword. Zhong Mingyu frowned, and his expression turned ugly. It seemed like the absolute Eagle King was really going to fight to the death. Do you think that's possible? Niet Tian wasn't afraid at all. He laughed coldly and was very arrogant. Courting death. The absolute Eagle King roared. Every word was filled with killing intent. The sword aura around him soared into the sky, and a violent sword intent spread out, turning into waves that wreaked havoc in the space. But he didn't attack immediately, because he was waiting for Zhong Mingyu to speak. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to go against the sky-defying martial sacred token. Wait! Just at that moment, Zhong Mingyu's eyes trembled and he let out a startled cry. His gaze towards the absolute Eagle King had a crafty glint in it as he said, Absolute Eagle King, what if I let you join the Heaven Martial Association? What? When the absolute Eagle King heard Zhong Mingyu's words, he frowned and instantly cried out. His eyes revealed a blazing light, and he even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Huh? At the same time, Gui Tongrun and Lu Mu were both stunned, and they looked at Zhong Mingyu in shock. They didn't think that Zhong Mingyu would actually propose such an attractive condition to the absolute Eagle King. I said, I want you to join the Heaven Martial Association. Zhong Mingyu repeated calmly, word by word. Are you serious? The absolute Eagle King heard it clearly this time. His eyes instantly became fanatical, and his entire person became excited. He never dreamed that Zhong Mingyu would actually let him join the Heaven Martial Group. The Heaven Martial Meet was something that countless martial artists yearned for in their dreams. Even the Palace Lord of the 7 Ultimate Demon Palace didn't have the right to join the Heaven Martial Group. Chapter 3394. Too fast, Zhong Mingyu looked at the ecstatic absolute Eagle King and nodded. But after you join Heaven Martial Group, you will be the lowest level Heaven Martial Artist. Of course. Absolute Eagle King reacted and chuckled, nodding his head like a rattle drum. He had never thought that he, who had been in a hopeless situation, would be able to turn misfortune into fortune. Joining Heaven Martial Group, even if he was the lowest level Heaven Martial artist, was an increase in status and identity. Zhong Mingyu was not strong, but he could become the first guardian of Sky Sword Martial Group because of his status as a Heaven Martial artist. Without this status, he could not have become the first guardian. At this moment, Absolute Eagle King looked at Nie Tian passionately. He was even grateful to him for killing Zhu Qing. Nie Tian, on the other hand, furrowed his brows in confusion. He was very curious about what kind of faction Zhong Mingyu spoke of was the Heaven Martial Group. Why was the Absolute Eagle King so willing to join the Heaven Martial Group as a low-level Heaven Martial artist despite his strength? Why did he look so happy? It was as if he had received a pie from the sky. On the other hand, Nie Tian was also very puzzled as to why Zhong Mingyu valued him so much. In order to protect him, he did not hesitate to let Absolute Eagle King join Heaven Martial Group. The crowd looked at the scene in front of them, puzzled. They had no idea what was going on. Of course, they did not know about Heaven Martial Group, much less what it meant. But from Absolute Eagle King's reaction, Heaven Martial Group should be a very powerful faction. Gue Tongrun and Lu Mu watched from afar. They were stunned for a long time before they reacted. Their gazes towards Absolute Eagle King were filled with undisguised jealousy. They were indeed jealous of Absolute Eagle King for being able to join Heaven Martial Group. How they wished that they were the ones joining Heaven Martial Group. Absolute Eagle King. At this moment, a token appeared in Zhong Mingyu's hand. He threw it to Absolute Eagle King and said solemnly, "From now on, you're a Huang-class Heaven Martial artist of Heaven Martial Group." Yes. Absolute Eagle King took the medallion, looked at it, and quickly nodded. One side of the medallion had Tian Wu written on it, and the other side had Huang, representing his status as a Huang-class Heaven Martial artist. Absolute Eagle King, your first mission now is to protect Nie Tian. Then, Zhong Mingyu said in a deep voice, "Next, Nie Tian can lose fair and square, but no one else is allowed to interfere." As he spoke, his gaze swept across Ghost Tong Run, and then continued, "Do you understand what I mean?" "Understood." Absolute Eagle King nodded and said loudly, "Don't worry, sir. This subordinate will protect Sir Nie Tian's safety, even if I have to risk my life." He was a smart person, so of course he understood what Zhong Mingyu meant. Nie Tian's next opponents were undoubtedly Gue Jiaozi and Jun Xinji. Zhong Mingyu did not want anything to happen to Nie Tian, nor did he want Gue Tongrun to intervene. So the existence of the Absolute Eagle King was to intimidate the Gue Tong people. At this moment, the Absolute Eagle King was even more shocked and could not help but raise his head to look at Nie Tian, with some fear in his eyes. From Zhong Mingyu's attitude of protecting Nie Tian, he could see how important Nie Tian was. He guessed that Nie Tian must have a very shocking identity. Otherwise, Zhong Mingyu would not protect him like this. He even suspected that Nie Tian was the son of some important person in the Heaven Martial Association. Everyone looked at the scene in the sky in shock and could not react for a long time. The situation had reversed too quickly, and people could not accept it. A moment ago, the Absolute Eagle King swore to kill Nie Tian, and now he was desperately protecting Nie Tian. It seemed that the Heaven Martial Association was indeed a very terrifying force. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to restrain the Absolute Eagle King so much. At this moment, the person with the ugliest expression was none other than Gue Tongrun. He originally wanted to watch a good show, but did not expect it to turn out like this. It had to be said that Zhong Mingyu was a very resourceful person. Not only did he successfully turn an enemy into a friend, but he also intimidated potential enemies. How could Gue Tongren not see that Zhong Mingyu letting Absolute Eagle King join the Heaven Martial Group was clearly to keep him in check? Indeed, Zhong Mingyu had made an exception and allowed the Absolute Eagle King to join the Heaven Martial Association in order to better protect Nie Tian. He would not allow anything to happen to Nie Tian. So, with the addition of Absolute Eagle King, it was even safer. "Zhong Mingyu, you're really good." At this time, Gue Tongren stepped forward and laughed coldly. After that, he swept his gaze over to the Absolute Eagle King and said, "Brother Absolute, to think that you are an elder of the Seven Despair Devil Palace. In the blink of an eye, you actually became someone else's dog. Gui Tong Run, don't be so harsh with your words." Being humiliated by Gui Tong Run, the Absolute Eagle King didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and said, "If Sir Zhong Mingyu let you join the Heaven Marshal Group, let alone a dog, even if you were to become dog shit, you would be willing to do it." You. Gui Tong Ren's face darkened. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he was speechless. Although the Absolute Eagle King's words were harsh, they hit the nail on the head. In the end, he was jealous of the Absolute Eagle King for joining the Heaven Marshal Group. Gui Jiaozi. At this time, Gui Tongren suddenly turned around and locked his gaze on Gui Jiaozi as he shouted, "Yes." Gui Jiaozi replied. Of course, he understood Gui Tongren's meaning. His figure immediately moved, leaping into the sky. A pair of evil eyes flickered with a cold light as they locked onto Nietian. He said, "Nietian, next let me, Gui Jiaozi, challenge you." As soon as he finished speaking, the killing intent in his eyes almost condensed into a substance, and it was on the verge of erupting. It was incomparably cold. Wait. However, the next moment, before Nietian could speak, Zhong Mingyu took a step forward and loudly said, "Nietian has just experienced a great battle with Zhu Qing, so he needs some time to recover. After 3 days, he will accept other challenges." Gui Jiaozi's eyes narrowed and his expression froze. He couldn't help but turn around to look at Gui Tongren. With his identity, of course, he didn't dare to directly refute Zhong Mingyu. "Recover?" Gui Tongren sneered. "Zhong Mingyu, you really have the nerve to say that." Before, when Nietian boasted that he would accept everyone's challenge, he didn't say that he needed to recover. Could it be that he is injured, so we all have to wait here for him? If he doesn't recover in a year or two, then we have to wait for another year or two. If that's the case, why don't you let him go into seclusion for a few thousand years before accepting any challenges? The cold voice, in addition to anger, was filled with even more killing intent. Zhong Mingyu frowned with an ugly expression. He also knew that his request was a bit unreasonable. However, at this time, Nietian really needed a rest. Then, Zhong Mingyu frowned and said in a heavy tone, "Gui Tongren, Nietian has accepted so many challenges. Can't he rest for 3 days?" "No." Gui Tongren's expression was gloomy and firm. He had already seen Nietian's strength, so he wanted to take advantage of the latter's lack of strength to let Gui Jiaozi take action. If Nietian was in his peak state, then Gui Jiaozi wouldn't have much of a chance to win. Zhong Mingyu's expression was ugly, and he was speechless. Chapter 3395. Nietian. Hearing Nietian's words, everyone was taken aback. Then, they turned to look at Nietian with shocked expressions. No one had expected that Nietian would take the initiative to step forward and accept the challenge at this moment. The crowd's eyes trembled as they saw Nietian's calm, relaxed expression. Not even the slightest ripple could be seen in his eyes. Instead, he seemed to be completely at ease. If it was before, everyone would have thought that Nietian was just pretending to be calm. But now, most people felt that Nietian must have an even more powerful trump card. They saw Nietian kill Zhu Qing with their own eyes, so they believed that Nietian also had the strength to kill Gui Jiaozi. "Nietian, you're quite arrogant." At this time, Gui Jiaozi looked at Nietian and smiled cold. "But your arrogance will get you killed." "Is that so?" Nietianling laughed and looked at Gui Jiaozi. "How much stronger do you think you are compared to Zhu Qing?" Gui Jiaozi's expression froze. He thought that his strength was on par with Zhu Qing. Nietian looking down on Zhu Qing was the same as looking down on him. Arrogant. Nietian's provocative attitude made Gui Jiaozi furious. He roared and instantly moved. A long sword appeared in his hand. It flashed with a cold light and slashed across the void. Suddenly, a dazzling sword light appeared in the space. A huge sword shadow rushed out like an ancient wild beast. It roared and crazily pressed down on Nietian. 9 limits of starry sky, sun annihilation. Nietion's eyes slightly narrowed. Sword intent surged from his body as he stabbed out with his sword. Boom! The next moment, the two sword shadows collided head-on in the void. The sound of an explosion echoed in the air. Waves of sword intent rushed out crazily. It was very terrifying. Nietion, this guy's so terrifying. The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in shock. All their attention was focused on Nietion. They didn't expect Nietion to still have such terrifying strength after his battle with Heartless. He wasn't inferior to Gue Jiaozi in the slightest. How is this possible? On the other hand, the absolute Eagle King's pupils constricted as he screamed in shock. He could not believe his eyes. What did he see? He saw that the sword in Nietion's hand was the 7 Despair demon sword. That's right, Nietion was not using his own sword, but the 7 Ultimate demon sword. Absolute Eagle King's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He was in disbelief. He was very surprised that Nietion could hold the 7 Demise demonic sword effortlessly. At this moment, Nietion was actually using the 7 Ultimate demon sword. Moreover, he was using it as he pleased, and he had great control over it. In his hands, the 7 Demise demon sword was even more powerful than when it was in Heartless hands. Nietion's figure was agile, and his expression was calm. It was as if he was not oppressed by the demonic aura of the 7 Demise demon sword at all. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, the absolute Eagle King would never have believed that there was a third person who could control the 7 Demise demon sword other than Patriarch Chijue and Heartless. Nietion was indeed not oppressed by the 7 Demise demon sword. He even felt that the demonic aura released by the 7 Demise demon sword would greatly enhance his demon god power. The demon god power was a combination of the extreme demon power and the spirit confinement power. The extreme demon power was a power of extreme yin and darkness, so Nietion's body was originally filled with the power of darkness. The demonic aura of the 7 Demise demon sword was also the power of darkness. If Nietion could control the extreme demon power, he could naturally control the 7 Demise demon sword as well. Speaking of which, Nietion's body contained all kinds of conflicting powers, such as the extreme demon power and the heavenly Dao power. If this situation had happened to an ordinary cultivator, they would have long been oppressed to death by the two powers. However, Nietion had the Star Origin Stone. Relying on the powerful tolerance of the star power, he was able to perfectly coexist with the various extreme powers. Boom! Boom! At this time, 2 muffled sounds came from the void. Nietion and Gue Jiao's figures retreated at the same time, rushing out of the raging waves. In the blink of an eye, the two exchanged more than a dozen blows, but they were actually evenly matched. QL 11-inch, damn it! Gue Jiao stood coldly in the void, his eyes filled with an evil light. He didn't expect Nietion to fight him with the 7 Demise demon sword. This made him feel humiliated. Strangely, Nietion seemed to be able to wield the 7 terminal demon swords with ease. Damn it, wasn't the 7 Demise demon sword only used by Heartless? Why can this kid use it too? Gue Jiao cursed in his heart. He couldn't help but look at his left arm, his eyes flickering. He was considering whether or not he should unseal the sword cry on his left arm. At this time, Nietion stood in the void and heard the voice of Ghost Emperor in his divine sense. Nietion, stop playing with him. Just kill him. Nietion didn't even activate the Sky Evolution Saint Soul in his battle against Gue Jiao. He only used the Supreme God Esoteric Realm to fight against Gue Jiao. At this time, the blood energy in his body was a little turbulent and his aura was a little unstable. He was injured in the battle against Heartless earlier and consumed a lot of energy. Now, he was at a great disadvantage fighting Gue Jiao head-on. He should have ended the battle quickly because he still had to face the strongest opponent, Junzue Ji. However, he had his own plans. He didn't use his real power at the moment and was only using Gue Jiao to practice. It was his first time using the 7 Demise demon sword, so he was still a little uncomfortable. He knew how terrifying Junzueji was. Whether or not he could defeat him in the next battle would depend on the 7 demised demon sword. Nietian nodded. A cold light flashed in his eyes, revealing his murderous intent. After getting used to the 7 demised demon sword, it was time to finish the battle. Boom! In the next moment, his body trembled. The Sky Evolution Saint soul in his body opened, and streams of Sky Evolution Saint force rushed into his martial body, causing his sword intent to break through the limit and reach the first layer of sword aura. Although the Supreme God Esoteric Realm and the first layer of sword aura were only one realm apart, there was an essential difference. A swordsman with sword aura could use the power of sword aura. Nietian's sword aura has increased. The crowd felt the sword intent fluctuations in the air, and their eyes trembled as they shouted in horror. They knew that Nietian was going to use his true strength. Gui Jiao, let them see your true strength. At this time, Gui Tong Ren's eyes trembled as he spoke coldly, his eyes surging with a fanatical light. Come! At this time, Gui Jiao, who was high up in the sky, roared and suddenly stretched out his left arm. Suddenly, a violent force surged out, directly tearing his sleeve into pieces, and an arm full of strange runes appeared. Nietian's eyes focused, and his expression couldn't help but change. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He sensed a very terrifying sword aura on Gui Jiao's arm. Chapter 3396. What a terrifying aura! The crowd looked at Gui Jiao and sensed the terrifying aura coming from the latter. Their expressions changed as they screamed in horror. Who would have thought that Gui Jiao was also hiding such a powerful trump card? Ghost Prison 8 Desolation, open. Gui Tongren looked at Gui Jiao with a ferocious gaze and said in a deep voice, Bratnia, you're dead. QL11, the sword seal on Gui Jiao's left arm, was called Ghost Prison 8 Desolation. It was the most powerful sword seal of the Ghost Prison sect, inherited from the Ghost Prison Emperor. Because it was too powerful, no one had been able to find a suitable inheritor. Gui Jiao was the only swordsman in the past 1,000,000 years to be able to withstand the seal. Ghost Prison 8 Desolation, thousands of ghosts wailed. There was no way for Nietian to survive this time. At the same time, Zhong Mingyu's expression changed as he became nervous. He didn't expect the Ghost Prison 8 Desolation sword seal to appear. He initially thought that Nietian would be able to end the battle quickly, but he didn't expect this to happen. His mood instantly became heavy. He didn't know how powerful the Ghost Hell sword seal was, but he knew that it wouldn't be easy for Nietian to defeat it. He only hoped that Nietian wouldn't be injured, or else he wouldn't have the chance to fight Junzueji. Nietian, you'll die beyond the shadow of a doubt today. At this time, Gui Jiao's furious roar resounded in the sky. An incomparably ferocious sword intent surged around his body. Endless wails echoed in the void like the cries of 10,000 ghosts. The scene was incomparably vicious. Is that so? Nietian slightly frowned. There was no fear in his eyes, only a strong battle intent. Gui Jiao's terrifying trump card made Nietian even more excited. Die! Gui Jiao was enraged after seeing Nietian's arrogance. He let out a roar, and a wave of death chi surged out from his left arm. It was extremely dark and condensed into dark runes in the air. Boom! 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 The next moment, Gui Jiao's expression darkened. Countless dark runes condensed behind him to form 3 huge gates. Each of the 3 ghost prison gates was tens of thousands of meters tall, as if they led directly to the abyss of hell. At the same time, they were like giant beasts that had opened their dark mouths, releasing an incomparably fierce death chi. The 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal could condense 8 ghost prison gates if its power was used to the extreme. However, Gui Jiao's strength was limited. He could only form 3 gates, and the power of the gates was far from its limit. But even so, the moment the 3 ghost prison gates appeared, the void suddenly sank and the surroundings began to shake as if the sky was going to collapse and the earth was going to collapse. The crowd was affected by the impact, and they all retreated. Their eyes trembled, unable to conceal the fear in their hearts. Very good. Gue Tong Ren's eyes trembled as he roared with killing intent. He didn't expect Gue Jiao to be able to form 3 gates at the same time. This was a great surprise for him. He was still a little worried earlier, but now he was certain that Nie Tian would die. In the distance, Zhong Mingyu's expression was very ugly. His eyes were trembling as the sword intent in his body surged. He was clearly ready to make a move. Ghost prison gates. Suppress. At that moment, Gue Jiao let out an explosive roar. Immediately after, the 3 ghost prison gates behind him rumbled like 3 wild beasts. In the next moment, waves of death chi spread out from the gates like dark clouds that blotted out the sky and pressed down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned. Then, the corner of his mouth pulled into a sneer. The sword intent in his body surged to the extreme as he raised the 7th demonic sword in his hand. Waves of demonic chi surged endlessly and turned into demonic flames in the sky. Sacred heaven-defying sword. Earth and man as one. Star and moon sync. In the next second, the corner of his mouth twitched. The 7th demonic sword descended from the sky. Suddenly, endless sword intent condensed into a sword image that was burning with demonic flames. It was tens of thousands of meters long, directly burning the surrounding void. Rumble! In the next instant, the terrifying sword image descended. A terrifying rumbling sound rang out in the void, causing the hearts of the crowd to tremble. Rumble! Then, under the gaze of countless people, the demonic flame sword image descended, attacking the death chi in the 8 directions, causing the void to tremble. Rumble! Waves of violent energy mercilessly wreaked havoc in the space. It was extremely terrifying, as if the entire world was about to be destroyed. The death chi, ghost prison gates, fiend god sword intent, 7th demonic flame, and countless other energies clashed together, causing the surrounding space to fall into chaos. Chi chi chi. In the sky, ear-piercing sounds rang out unceasingly. The impact of the darkness spread in the air, wreaking havoc. At the center of the dark energy, Nie Tian's silhouette dashed forward. The star's soul wings on his back unfurled, increasing his speed to the limit. At this moment, he was actually rushing towards Gue Jiao. Bang, bang, bang. The berserk shockwaves from the surrounding space landed on his body, almost tearing his body apart. Countless bloody wounds appeared on his body. His entire body was covered in blood, and his flesh was a bloody mess. However, this didn't stop him at all. Instead, it made him even more determined and faster. Gue Jiao saw Nie Tian's figure through the violent energy. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and a look of fear appeared on his face. He didn't expect Nie Tian to rush straight towards him. Is Nie Tian a madman? However, as Nie Tian's figure got closer, he felt an incomparably real threat. This was the threat of death, a life-threatening threat. Boom! 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 At this moment, Nie Tian's figure actually broke through the 3 ghost prison gates and arrived less than 100 meters away from Gue Jiao. Die! Gue Jiao's eyes trembled. He roared and punched out. The 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal released a terrifying energy that condensed into a fist image, blasting towards Nie Tian. Walala! However, Nie Tian's figure didn't retreat at all. 9 shackles appeared on his body and condensed into a ball. They whistled and forcibly broke through the fist image. The next moment, before Gue Jiao could even react, his entire body was shackled by the 9 shackles, rendering him immobile. The 9 shackles released the power of the heavenly Tao, suppressing Gue Jiao to the point that he couldn't breathe. What kind of power is this? Gue Jiao was shocked and shouted, "Die!" However, what responded to him was an extremely cold voice. This voice was like a death knell. When it fell, it also announced Gue Jiao's death. Boom! The 9 heavenly Tao shackles suddenly tightened. Gui Jiao didn't even have time to scream before his body exploded into a bloody mist. Gui Jiao, a sword prodigy of the Ghost Prison sect, a swordsman of the 9th Heavenly Sword Rhyme, died just like that. He didn't even have the chance to use the power of the rhyme. At the same time, in the void, the 3 Ghost Prison gates directly collapsed, turning into black smoke and dissipating. After a while, the chaotic time and space calmed down, and a figure appeared in front of everyone. It was Nie Tian. When everyone saw Nie Tian's face clearly, they all took a deep breath and were dumbfounded. Chapter 3397. Chapter 3392. A true opponent deathly silence. A deathly silence that shocked everyone to the extreme. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nie Tian. Their almost lifeless expressions perfectly displayed the shock in their hearts. Nie Tian killed Gui Jiaozi. This was something that no one had expected. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they couldn't react for a long time. High up in the sky, only Nie Tian stood there coldly. Sword intent surged around him, making him look like a sharp sword standing between heaven and earth. This is impossible. After a long time, an ear-piercing howl was heard. It was Gui Tongrun. He seemed to have gone mad. His expression was one of shock, and his eyes were unfocused. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Gui Jiaozi, who had formed 3 gates, had died in the hands of Nie Tian. How is this possible? If there was only one gate, Gui Tongren would still believe that Nie Tian could break it. However, how could Nie Tian possibly break 3 Ghost Prison gates? What kind of terrifying power was hidden in Nie Tian? 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal. Gui Tongren's expression froze for a long time before he finally reacted. His eyes suddenly trembled and focused on the black vortex above Nie Tian's palm. Not only did Nie Tian kill Gui Jiaozi, but he also obtained the 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal. Brat, leave the 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal behind. In the blink of an eye, Ghost Tongren's expression flickered as he shot towards Nie Tian like a streak of light. Nie Tian felt a powerful aura approaching. He frowned and looked over. Gui Tongren, if you want to touch Lord Nie Tian, you have to ask me, the absolute Eagle King. At the same time, a violent voice sounded. A silhouette descended like a mountain and blocked Gui Tongren. It was the absolute Eagle King. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched into a sinister smile. With his intelligence, he could naturally guess that Zhong Mingyu made the absolute Eagle King join the Heaven Marshal Group just for this moment. Absolute Eagle King. Are you really willing to be Zhong Mingyu's dog? Gui Tong's figure turned sluggish as he stood cold in the sky. His eyes were cold as he stared at Absolute Eagle King and roared. Gui Tongren, our strength is about the same. If you want to fight to the death, then I, the Absolute Eagle King, will accompany you to the end. The Absolute Eagle King ignored Gui Tongren's insult and coldly smiled. Since he had joined the Heaven Marshal Association, he would naturally listen to Zhong Mingyu's arrangements. Furthermore, he was certain that Nie Tian's identity was extraordinary. As long as he protected Nie Tian well, his status in the Heaven Marshal Association would definitely rise. In his heart, Nie Tian was already his thigh, so of course he had to hold on to it. Gui Tongren's face darkened and became extremely ugly. He was momentarily speechless. The Absolute Eagle King was right. The two of them were evenly matched. If they were to fight to the death, the outcome would be 50-50. But now, there was Zhong Mingyu by his side, so Absolute Eagle King's chances of winning were undoubtedly higher. If they were to really fight to the death, the one who would die would most likely be him, Gui Tongren. Gui Tongren. Gui Jiaozi was killed by Lord Nie Tian. The 8 Desolate Ghost Prison Sword Seal on him should naturally belong to Lord Nie Tian. Seeing that Gui Tongren was silent, Absolute Eagle King said with a cold smile. Gui Tongren's face darkened to the extreme. It was obvious that he was suppressing the anger in his heart. The Ghost Prison sect will not let this matter rest. After a moment, he calmed down a little. He looked at Zhong Mingyu coldly and his figure moved as he retreated. He was a smart person. He knew that this was not the time to make a move. He could only endure. Zhong Mingyu frowned slightly and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He did not want to see Absolute Eagle King and Gue Tongren fight. Gue Tongren being able to maintain his calm was the best situation. As for how the Ghost Prison Sect would take revenge in the future, that would be another matter. The Ghost Prison Sect's overall strength was about the same as the Seven Despair Demon Palace. But behind it, there was a hidden great force. Even the Heaven Martial Association was somewhat afraid of that great force. Lord Gue Tongren. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure appeared in the sky. It's him. Everyone's eyes trembled. When they saw the person's face clearly, their expressions changed and they cried out in shock. The figure that appeared was none other than Junzue Ji. Gue Tongren's face darkened. He looked at Junzue Ji and said cold, "Kid, what do you want?" Junior wants to join the Ghost Prison Sect. Junzue Ji's face darkened. A strange light surged in his eyes as he said cold. Gue Tongren was stunned. He couldn't help but suspect that he had heard wrongly. He had never thought that Junzue Ji would want to join the Ghost Prison Sect. What? When everyone heard Junzue Ji's words, they were also stunned. Everyone was stunned. They looked at Junzue Ji with undisguised contempt. Junzue Ji first betrayed the Sky Sword Martial Sect and joined the Yu King Sword Sect. Now, he betrayed the Yu King Sword Sect and wants to join the Ghost Prison Sect. Is this person addicted to being a traitor? I will take back the 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal for the Ghost Prison Sect. At this time, Junzue Ji stood coldly in the sky. He looked at Gue Tongren and said, "Good." Gue Tongren's eyes trembled. He immediately reacted. He laughed loudly and said, "Junzue Ji, from now on, you are a member of my Ghost Prison Sect." With his intelligence, how could he not see through Junzue Ji's thoughts? Junzue Ji joining the Ghost Prison Sect was obviously to seek protection. He was worried that Zhong Mingyu and the others would interfere in the battle with Nietian. He had absolute confidence that he could defeat Nietian. However, he was afraid that it would anger Zhong Mingyu. Him joining the Ghost Prison Sect was actually a naked deal. He helped the Ghost Prison Sect take back the 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal, and Gue Tongren would protect his safety. Junzue Ji nodded. His face was cold, without the slightest bit of joy. Then his figure moved. He arrived in the sky. His pair of cold eyes locked onto Nietian. He said coldly, "Nietian, it's time for our battle." Junzue Ji, it seems like you're very confident in yourself. Nietian smiled faintly. The corner of his mouth twitched. The two of them had yet to fight, but Junzue Ji had already found a way to retreat. Obviously, he was very confident in himself. You were able to defeat Heartless and Gue Jiaozi. You are indeed very powerful. Junzue Ji's eyes were gloomy. He said, "But in my eyes, they are nothing but trash. Even if you kill them, you are definitely not my opponent." His calm voice was filled with a cold and domineering intent. It must be said that Junzue Ji was extremely confident. Under normal circumstances, people with this kind of confidence were the top geniuses. Is that so? The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He smiled coldly. "Nietian, your injuries are not light. In order to have a fair fight, I can wait for you to recover before we fight." Junzue Ji's eyes darkened as he said indifferently. What did he say? His words fell into everyone's ears. They could not help but exclaim in surprise. Junzue Ji took the initiative to let Nietian rest. This was something that no one had expected. "You want me to rest?" Nietian was also stunned. He frowned and asked. Chapter 3398. Bloodline Original Spirit. A true opponent is worthy of respect. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard Junzue Ji's words, and his expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Junzue Ji to say such words. "Nietian, you can start resting now. In 5 days, we will have a life and death duel, a fair fight." Junzue Ji spoke again, and then turned to leave. This guy, he actually let Nie Tian recover his strength and fight again. The eyes of the crowd trembled violently, and they all looked at Jun Zui-ji with a strange expression. Jun Zui-ji's decision was beyond everyone's expectations, and no one could have imagined it. In the past, Jun Zui-ji was a shameless traitor in their eyes. But now, it seemed that this traitor still had a bit of pride. Wait, but at this moment, Nie Tian's voice suddenly rang out, and Jun Zui-ji stopped. Do you have any other requests? Jun Zui-ji's body froze, and he turned to look at Nie Tian and asked, There's no need to wait for 5 days. Let the battle between us begin now. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly, Huh? Jun Zui-ji frowned, and his face instantly became gloomy, and anger surged in his eyes. Nie Tian's words made him feel humiliated. He gave Nie Tian time to recover, and regarded Nie Tian as a true opponent, and gave him the greatest respect. But Nie Tian wanted to fight him with injuries, and it was obvious that he looked down on him. How could he not be angry? Jun Zui-ji, you have confidence, and so do I. Nie Tian could feel Jun Zui-ji's anger, and said with a faint smile. Jun Zui-ji gave him time to recover, not only out of respect, but also because of his strong confidence. Jun Zui-ji believed that even if Nie Tian was at his peak, he would not be afraid. Because of this, he was so generous to give Nie Tian time to recover. The reason why Nie Tian wanted to start the battle right away was also because he had full confidence in his own strength. Nie Tian believed that even if he was injured, he would still be able to defeat Jun Zui-ji. However, other than confidence, there was another reason that made Nie Tian start the battle right away, and that was time. It had been some time since he arrived at the Sky Sword State. He was worried about Mo Rushi and the others, so he had to return to the 9 regions as soon as possible. He couldn't wait for 5 days to recover. Has Nie Tian gone mad? The crowd looked at Nie Tian in shock and exclaimed. After the battle with Heartless and Gue Jiaozi, Nie Tian was heavily injured and his strength was severely depleted. At this moment, what he needed the most was rest. Jun Zui-ji gave him time to rest, but he didn't want it. If he wasn't crazy, then what was? Nie Tian. Zhong Mingyu's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. He didn't understand why Nie Tian wanted to start the war immediately. He had already experienced 2 big battles, so no one felt that it was inappropriate for him to rest now. Nie Tian, do you really want to fight now? High up in the sky, Jun Zui-ji asked with a gloomy and cold expression. Of course. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His face was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Jun Zui-ji frowned. He was actually hesitating. He didn't want to take advantage of Nie Tian. What he wanted was a fair battle. Jun Zui-ji, since the other party doesn't appreciate it, why do you insist? At this time, Gue Tongren's voice rang out, shouting loudly. He didn't care about respect, or what fair battle. What he wanted was Nie Tian's death. He must take back the Ghost Prison 8 Desolation Sword Seal. Jun Zui-ji turned to look at Gue Tongren, then locked his gaze on Nie Tian. After thinking for a long time, he said solemnly, Nie Tian, since you insist, then I won't be polite. Remember, I won't hold back any of my strength. I will treat you as a real opponent. I will go all out. Thank you. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His face was calm. Good. Jun Zui-ji's eyes darkened. He roared. His whole body's imposing aura crazily surged. A violent sword intent like a landslide and tsunami burst out. And in his hand, a dark blue long sword appeared. Sword chi crisscrossed. Sword light shot out tens of thousands of meters. Heaven weeping heart execution. Zhong Mingyu saw the long sword in Jun Zui-ji's hand. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He cried out in alarm. Heaven Weeping Heart Execution is Jun Zui-ji's Yuan Spirit Sword. Moreover, it is a Yuan Spirit Sword that contains the power of bloodline. Under normal circumstances, the power of a martial artist's bloodline will manifest in the martial body's Yuan Meridian. But there are some special martial artists whose bloodline power condenses in a Yuan Spirit Sword. Jun Zui-ji is such a special martial artist, His bloodline power exists in his Yuan spirit sword, Heaven Weeping Heart Execution. This is why Zhong Mingyu was very surprised when he saw Heaven Weeping Heart Execution. Because Heaven Weeping Heart Execution is very powerful, Junzue Ji rarely uses it. At this moment, facing Nietian, he directly used Heaven Weeping Heart Execution. It can be seen that he's also a bit afraid of Nietian. The sword in his hand, the aura, is so strong. At the same time, Nietian felt an unusually strong aura from Heaven Weeping Heart Execution. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He cried out in alarm in his heart. This is a bloodline Yuan spirit. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice also sounded. It was very nervous. Bloodline Yuan spirit? Nietian was stunned for a moment. He can't help but frown, his face full of doubt. He has never heard of a bloodline Yuan spirit. He doesn't know what it is. The so-called bloodline Yuan spirit is the power of the bloodline condensed in the Yuan spirit. The Ghost Emperor said in a deep voice, "This guy called Junzue Ji is a bloodline Yuan spirit martial artist. His bloodline power exists in the Yuan spirit sword." "So that's it." Nietian frowned. His face can't help but change. He is quite shocked. No wonder he sensed an unusually powerful bloodline power from Heaven's Tear Heart Execution. The bloodline power exists in the Yuan spirit. It is really rare. Junzue Ji was already a swordsman at the first heaven of the Oracle realm. Coupled with the power of his bloodline, the power of his sword will increase several times. It is very terrifying. "Nietian, I am going to attack." At this moment, Junzue Ji's eyes trembled. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He said coldly. Suddenly all the sword in his body crazily surged out. Like a raging wave, exploding in the void, the impact made the sky and earth tremble. An incomparably powerful sword momentum appeared on his body, shooting up into the sky, making his whole body look like a giant sword. It seems that the whole world has become small. "Kill!" The next moment, Junzue Ji shouted, the Heaven Weeping Heart Execution in the air. The tip of the sword pointed, a sword shadow whistled out. Suddenly in the void, there's a roar. It is like the void is about to explode. Boom! The sword's shadow, tens of thousands of meters long, like a heaven-defying dragon. It is extremely terrifying. So strong. The crowd can feel the terrifying fluctuations coming from the void. They can't help but exclaim. Their eyes can't help but tremble. The power of Junzue Ji's first sword is beyond imagination. It shocked the crowd. Chapter 33:99. Heart-piercing tears. This fellow is indeed very strong. High up in the air, Nietian could feel the violent pressure bearing down on him. His eyes involuntarily trembled as shock filled his heart. He knew that Junzue Ji's strength far surpassed Merciless and Gue Jiaozi's, but he didn't expect Junzue Ji to be this strong. Such a terrifying sword shadow. It was unknown how many times stronger it was compared to Merciless and Gue Jiaozi. Even Merciless, who had opened the eye of the Devil Dragon, and Gue Jiaozi, who had opened the 8 desolate ghost prison sword seal, couldn't contend against Junzue Ji. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Nietian reacted. The Sky Evolution Saint's soul once again became berserk. Waves of terrifying Sky Evolution Saint force gushed into his martial body, causing his sword intent to soar to its peak. But even so, Nietian's sword Dao was only at the first heavenly layer, while Junzue Ji was at the first heavenly layer of Divine Oracle. Between the two of them, there was an entire realm of difference. Saint Heaven-defying sword, earth and man as one, stars and moons sync. At this time, Nietian couldn't care less. He could only fight with all his might. With a low roar, the devil sword of 7 extinction blasted out. The sword shadows were like raging dragons, rushing towards the surroundings. Rumble! In the next instant, the 2 sword shadows collided with each other, causing the void to tremble. Endless waves of sword intent gushed out, causing the sky to change color and the wind to howl. The eyes of the spectators trembled. They didn't expect that the first exchange between Nietian and Junzue Ji would be so terrifying. Bang! A moment later, A muffled sound rang out from the turbulent void. A blood-colored silhouette was flung through the air, leaving a trail of blood behind him. It was none other than Nietion. Nietion. The eyes of the spectators violently trembled as they exclaimed in unison. They all knew that Junzue Ji was very powerful, but they didn't expect him to injure Nietion to this extent in the first exchange. Who? Nietion was still in midair, but a pair of astral soul wings suddenly appeared on his back, stabilizing his body. His entire body was dripping with blood, but his eyes were extremely sharp as he stared fixedly at Junzue Ji. Junzue Ji's strength in the way of the sword was truly terrifying. In a head-on confrontation, Nietion would not be able to contend against him. Nietion, is this all you've got? At this moment, Junzue Ji let out a low roar. The heaven-weeping heart executioner arced through the air, emitting a blinding light. A terrifying sword will burst forth, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. With the second sword, Junzue Ji erupted with an even greater power. His sword Dao Realm was much stronger than Nietion's to begin with. Coupled with the increase brought about by the power of his bloodline, Nietion couldn't fight him at all. 9 limits of the starry sky, annihilation of the sun. Nietion's eyes flickered, and he hastily stabbed with his sword. At the same time, he frantically retreated. Boom! Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the two sword shadows collided head-on. Terrifying waves erupted in the void like endless wild beasts, as if they wanted to devour everything. Bang! Immediately, after a muffled sound, Nietion's figure was once again sent flying. A horrifying wound appeared on his chest. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. His flesh was twisted, and blood gushed out incessantly. Nietion. Seeing this, Zhong Mingyu and the others' eyes trembled, and they cried out in alarm. They didn't expect that the battle in front of them would turn into a slaughter. Stinking brat, you're dead. In the distance, Gue Tongren's face was cold. His eyes were filled with a cold light and fanaticism, as if he could already see the scene of Nietion being slaughtered. He didn't believe that Nietion still had the strength to reverse the situation in this situation. Nietion, how much blood do you have left to bleed? High up in the sky, Junzue Ji's voice resounded. His voice was deep like thunder and extremely terrifying. A lot. Nietion steadied himself and roared. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, an incomparably crazy battle intent surged. Then he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood on the 7 Extinction Demon sword. Immediately, incomparably dark runes of the 7 Extinction Demon sword appeared on the sword. Shrill screams resounded in the void, and the entire sky seemed like a purgatory. Seeing this scene, the Absolute Eagle King's eyes suddenly trembled, and he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Nietion's ferocity had far exceeded his expectations. Using his blood to stimulate the 7 Extinction Demon sword's demonic energy, this move was too bold. As a result, the demonic energy of the 7 Extinction Demon sword had undoubtedly increased by several times. Yet, Nietion was still able to withstand it. It was simply unbelievable. Die! Junzue Ji frowned slightly. Then he let out a low roar. His silhouette moved in the blink of an eye. The heaven-weeping heart, slashing sword streaked across the sky, and a sword shadow appeared. Like a falling mountain, it rushed towards Nietion. Die! Nietion's eyes froze, and he also let out a low roar. The 7 Extinction Demon sword slashed out angrily, and the divine demon sword will surged crazily, fused with the demonic energy, and turned into a terrible sword shadow. Boom! The two sword shadows were like wild beasts, colliding with each other with a loud bang. Heaven and earth trembled, and the space shook. Boom, boom, boom. Chi, chi, chi. The terrible power dissipated crazily like a tsunami. It was incomparably violent. At the same time, ear-piercing noises were heard continuously, and the heaven and earth were trembling crazily. How terrifying! The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they could feel their divine sense trembling slightly. They couldn't help but retreat again. The strength of Nietian and Junzueji had exceeded their expectations, and the degree of violence of this battle was even more beyond their imagination. Bang! Bang! At this time, two muffled sounds were heard. Nietian and Junzueji's silhouettes retreated at the same time, and they retreated thousands of meters away. Junzueji was stunned for a moment, and his face instantly became incomparably gloomy. He originally thought that Nietian had no strength to fight back, but he didn't expect that the latter could still burst out with such terrible power. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes also trembled, and they were all stunned. The power of Junzueji's third sword was obviously more terrible than the previous two sword strikes, but Nietian was able to resist it. This time, it was no longer a brutal killing, but an evenly matched situation. Junzueji, your strength is only SOSO. Nietian frowned and said with a cold smile. He used the divine demon blood to stimulate the power of the 7 extinction demon sword and let the demonic energy crazily burst out, increasing the power of his sword will. However, this also made his martial body bear even more terrible pressure from the demonic energy. At this time, although he looked fine on the surface, the blood and chi in his body were already churning, and his whole person was in a berserk state. The feeling of bursting with power was admittedly good, but if he couldn't control this power, there was the danger of being devoured by it. Nietian, you are an opponent worthy of respect. I will give you a quick death. Junzueji frowned. Killing intent surged in his eyes, his body shook, and suddenly a terrible sword will surged out. It was extremely mysterious and surged on the heaven-weeping heart execution sword. The power of divine decree. When Zhong Mingyu, Absolute Eagle King, Gue Tongren, and the others saw this scene, their faces changed at the same time, and they cried out in alarm. Chapter 3400, 3395. One with heaven and earth. The power of the oracle was the symbol of an oracle swordsman. The so-called oracle was a frightening power condensed by a swordsman's sword intent. The power of the oracle was similar to the power of the sword rhyme, but it was even more frightening. It could enhance a swordsman's strength even more. However, the condensation of the power of the oracle was not simple. Once a swordsman used the power of the oracle, he would be weakened for several months or even longer. Most powers in the world were like this. The strongest power would inevitably bring about serious negative effects. Junzueji condensed the power of the oracle to kill Nietian once and for all. Nietian's expression changed when he sensed Junzueji's aura. Junzueji's sword intent aura was several times stronger than before, making him feel a real threat. Nietian, he is going to use the power of the oracle. If you can block this attack, you will win this battle. The Ghost Thearka's nervous voice rang out. Now, if you have any trump cards, use them immediately. The Ghost Tharch believed that Nietian must have a trump card if he dared to fight Junzueji directly. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard the Ghost Thearka's words. A strange smile appeared on his face. He did have a trump card. When fighting Heartless and Gue Jiaozi, Nietian had used the Supreme Dragon Vein, the Demon Eye, the Heavenly Tao Shackles, and other powers. He couldn't use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast, the God Fiend Body, or even the Heavenly Punishment Godly Reversal. So what other trump cards did he have now? It's time for the Starry Sky / to appear again. Nietian smiled faintly as the Starry Sky / appeared in his hand. What is he doing? Seeing this scene, the crowd couldn't help but let out a cry. Nietian already had the 7 ultimate demon sword in his hand. Why did he take out the Starry Sky / Starlight Heavenly / was Nietian's original sword. However, this might seem to be inferior to the 7 absolute demonic sword. Could it be that he's going to use? Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietian and suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled and he spat out 2 words, dual swords. He instantly understood that Nietian was going to use dual swords. Dual swords? Eternally merciless eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. His expression changed. Nietian was using two swords. This was something he didn't even dare to think about. A swordsman would usually use a single sword, because only by concentrating the sword intent at a single point could one unleash the full power of the sword intent. Using two swords at the same time was not only very demanding on the swordsman, but it was also difficult to control two swords at the same time. It was far less powerful than a single sword. Nietian, using dual swords, was simply playing with his life. Nietian, Nie Fenghua also understood when he saw this scene. His expression suddenly changed, and he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Nietian was simply too crazy. He couldn't believe it. He was a martial artist with dual sword and saber primordial spirits, but he rarely used his broken sword and saber together. Even if he used them at the same time, he would combine them as one sword. However, Nietian was using two swords at the same time. What was even more fatal was that the auras of Nietian's two swords were completely different. The seven absolute demonic swords' demonic aura was dark, while the starlight heavenly slash was dazzling. The auras of these two swords clashed. Could Nietian really control them when he used them at the same time? At the same time, the Ghost Emperor understood Nietian's meaning. His eyes trembled as he cried out in shock. Nietian, are you crazy? He didn't expect that Nietian's so-called trump card was actually using the seven absolute demonic sword and the starlight heavenly slash at the same time. Believe me, Nietian's face was calm, so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Dual swords? Jun Zuei-ji looked at Nietian, sneered, and said, Nietian, you overestimate yourself. Dual swords could only be used by a swordsman at the peak of swordsmanship. However, Nietian, a swordsman who relied on special methods to reach the first heavenly layer of swordsmanship, actually used dual swords. Wasn't he courting death? This is the last move. Make your move. Nietian was very calm and said in a deep voice. The sword intent surged all over his body, and at the same time, the blood chi around his body surged violently. Since you are courting death, I will fulfill your wish. Jun Zuei-ji's face darkened, and killing intent surged in his eyes. He spat out a word from his throat, kill. Boom! In the next moment, he directly attacked. The heaven's tear heart execution suddenly pierced out, and the void trembled. Suddenly, a sword shadow appeared, and the boundless sword intent directly caused the heaven and earth to tremble. The surging sword intent pervaded the heaven and earth, causing the void to rumble unceasingly. This sword, Jun Zuei-ji used the power of the oracle, his strongest power, his strongest sword. Sacred heaven-defying sword. Earth's sword engulfs the moon. At this time, Nietian's figure also moved, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. On the starlight heavenly slash, the sword light shone brightly, and then he continued to say, Sacred heaven-defying sword. Heavenly sword reverses the sun. Boom! As his voice fell, the seven absolute demonic sword in his hand overflowed with demonic chi, and the surging violent aura surged to the extreme. The wind and clouds surged, and the heaven and earth changed color. With the starlight heavenly slash and the seven absolute demonic sword in hand, Nietian used the earth sword in one hand and the heavenly sword in the other. This scene was too strange, as if Nietian wasn't using the sword alone, but was using it in two places. His psychic power is so strong. Zhong Mingyu stared unblinkingly at Nietian, his face flabbergasted by what he was seeing. His psychic power is so strong. Nietian was using two swords, and he could actually use different sword techniques. It was too terrifying. The strength of Nietian's psychic power and exquisite control over his sword intent had already reached the pinnacle. It was hard to imagine how Nietian, at such a young age, could have such powerful mental strength. Nietian's own mental strength was not enough to support him using two swords at the same time, and he could use different sword techniques. However, after connecting with the Eternal Night Demon Fox's divine sense, he could borrow the eternal night demon fox's mental strength. If it was only his own mental strength, using different heavenly swords and earth swords at the same time would cause his divine sense to collapse. Heaven and earth as one, kill. In the next moment, an even more shocking scene took place. Tian swung both of his swords at the same time, causing the void to tremble as two sword projections shot out like two giant beasts, roaring and howling. And in midair, the two sword shadows actually merged into one. Heavenly sword reverses the sun, earth sword swallows the moon. Tian used these two techniques at the same time to make heaven and earth as one. Since the mortal sword cuts the stars and the earth sword swallows the moon could be merged, then the heavenly sword and the earth sword could also be merged. However, with Tian's current swordsmanship, he was still unable to understand heaven and earth as one. So he could only use this clumsy method to simulate heaven and earth as one. Boom! In the void between heaven and earth as one, there was a crazy roar, and the world trembled as if it was the end of the world. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the two giant sword shadows, and their expressions were blank. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Rumble! At this moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the two sword shadows collided. Heaven and earth suddenly became solemn, and the void stagnated for a moment. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the next moment, endless violent waves of sword intent spread from the center of the collision, as if thousands of demons were dancing. It was terrifying. Chapter 34:01. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the void, waves after waves of terrifying energy ravaged the space, as if thousands of demons were roaring, wanting to devour everything in the world. Amidst the endless rumbling, Tian and Jun Zueji's silhouettes were instantly submerged, disappearing from sight. The eyes of the crowd violently trembled. Their expressions changed. They were so shocked that they couldn't speak. No one would have thought that the battle between Tian and Jun Zueji would be so terrifying. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, it would be very hard to believe that this was a battle between two young cultivators. At this moment, although the expressions of the crowd were slightly different, they all expressed the same shock. Gui Tong Run, Zhong Mingyu, and the others were all dumbfounded, their expressions sluggish, unable to react for a long time. At the same time, in the endless waves, two silhouettes stood upright. They were precisely Tian and Jun Zueji. The two of them were like the peak of a mountain, withstanding the waves of violent attacks. Tian's martial body was extremely powerful, but the violent attacks in the void were extremely terrifying. Outside his body, there were actually many bloody wounds. His entire body was dripping with blood, looking extremely terrifying. However, he didn't retreat even half a step. Instead, his aura soared to the sky. A terrifying sword intent was released, forcefully resisting the attacks. On the other hand, Jun Zueji was continuously retreating. His sword intent was indeed stronger than Tian's, but his martial body was much weaker than Tian's. Die! At this time, in the endless waves, Tian roared. A terrifying sword intent surged around his body, soaring into the sky. Following that, both of his swords shot out. Two terrifying sword images whistled out, like crazed beasts, breaking through the layers of waves, rushing towards Jun Zueji. Jun Zueji's figure continuously retreated, suddenly feeling a terrifying suppressive force rushing towards him. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He let out a cry of terror. He didn't expect that under such a terrifying attack, Tian still had the strength to attack again. Die! 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 In the chaotic void, Tian's voice reverberated, incomparably tyrannical, filled with intense killing intent. QL11 Jun Zueji's eyes trembled. He wanted to resist, but he found that his whole body was enveloped by a terrifying power, and he couldn't release his sword will. Bang! In the next moment, a violent sword shadow fell, and a muffled sound rang out in the air. Jun Zueji's body was like a kite with a broken string, directly flying out. When the crowd saw a blood-colored figure flying out, their eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. They were extremely shocked. "It is the king who sinned." In the next moment, they saw the blood-colored figure's face clearly and cried out in surprise. Then, they were shocked into a daze. The person who was sent flying was actually Junzueji. No one dared to believe this. Everyone's eyes trembled as they stared at Junzueji in disbelief. "Junzueji, you've lost." At this moment, a cold and domineering voice resounded in the sky. Then, a silhouette stepped out from the endless waves. It was Nietion. At this moment, Nietion's entire body was similarly drenched in blood, and he seemed to be heavily injured. However, his gaze was still fierce, bone-piercingly cold, ferocious, and overbearing. "Nietion." Junzueji steadied his body and stared at Nietion with unconcealable fear in his eyes. He didn't expect Nietion to be so ferocious. "Nietion." At this moment, everyone's eyes instantly shifted to Nietion, and they all exclaimed. Nietion was so strong that he had actually defeated Junzueji. This. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietion from afar, his eyes trembling, and he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. In his heart, of course, he hoped that Nietion would win. But when Nietion really won, he felt that the scene was a bit illusory, as if it was not real. It had to be said that the strength that Nietion had displayed was too terrifying. With the realm of transcendent ultimacy, he had defeated a primordial spirit swordsman of the first heaven of the Oracle realm. This battle could be said to be shocking. Eternally Merciless and the others were also shocked, and their expressions were dull. Ghost Tongren, on the other hand, finally snapped out of his daze. His wrinkled face grew very unsightly as he looked at Nietion with not only a hint of coldness and malice in his eyes, but also a hint of unconcealable fear. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have thought that a transcendent ultimacy swordsman from a territory could actually defeat a first heaven of the Oracle realm. The most terrifying thing about Nietion was not his strength and combat power, but his talent. At this moment, he was only in the realm of transcendent ultimacy. If he grew up in the future, how terrifying his combat power would be. It was hard to imagine. Nietion, he really won. Junzueji was the former sword chief in the sky, and he actually lost to Nietion. It's really incredible. Nietion is too strong. He's simply a monster. Moments later, everyone came to their senses and began to discuss among themselves, their eyes filled with unconcealable awe as they looked at Nietion. "I've lost." High up in the sky, Junzueji's body swayed slightly, and his eyes were a little dull, as if all the light had been lost in an instant. He was Junzueji. He was the sword chief of the Sky Swordsmen. He was a peerless genius, and he wanted to fight for first place in everything. But at this moment, he had lost to Nietion, and it was a crushing defeat. His pride, his drive, and his sharpness had been completely crushed by the end of this battle. At this moment, Junzueji suddenly raised his head and stared at Nietion, and couldn't help but ask, "Nietion, why didn't you kill me?" Nietion could have killed him with that sword just now, but he didn't do so. Nietion deliberately let him live. "Junzueji, where's your edge? Where's your pride?" Nietionling sneered, looking at Junzueji with disdain, and said, "You lost this battle. I didn't kill you because I felt that you were an opponent worthy of my respect. But look at you now. Just because you lost a battle, you've lost your edge. Your temperament is not worthy of your talent." The low voice fell in Junzueji's ears like a clap of thunder, making him feel as if he had been electrocuted. "Your temperament is not worthy of your talent." These words were like a steel needle, ruthlessly stabbing into Junzueji's heart, causing his entire body to shake, and his dull eyes once again regained their sharpness. Nietion was right. If he lost his edge because of a battle, then he really would be letting down his talent. Nietion felt the light in Junzueji's eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he smiled in relief. He didn't kill Junzueji because he was being merciful. Junzueji's life was fought for by himself. If Junzueji had directly started the battle with Nie Tian and not let Nie Tian recover from his injuries before fighting, then he would have been a corpse by now. It was because of this that Nie Tian felt that Junzueji was not completely useless. Perhaps Junzueji's betrayal had its own difficulties. Chapter 34:02. Chapter 33:97. Junzueji's words stunned everyone present. Your life is your own. You don't need to owe me. Nie Tian looked at Junzueji. The corner of his mouth twitched as he said with a faint smile, I, Junzueji, do not like to owe anyone. I owe you my life. I will definitely return it to you. Junzueji said with a grave and stern face. After saying that, he directly turned around and came to Gue Tongren's side. He failed to challenge Nie Tian, but at this moment, he did not feel too disappointed. He admitted that Nie Tian was indeed stronger than him. He lost to Nie Tian, but at the same time, he also learned some things from Nie Tian. Gue Tongren looked at Junzueji. His face was very gloomy, but he did not say anything. Now, does anyone still want to challenge me? At this time, Nie Tian took a step forward. The bloodstains on his body were cleansed. His eyes swept across the audience and said insolently. Everyone's eyes trembled violently. They clearly looked at Nie Tian in fear. Nie Tian killed Heartless and Gue Jiaozi, and also defeated Junzueji, who would dare to challenge him now. Even if Nie Tian was seriously injured, no one dared to stand out. Since no one continues to challenge me, can I take it that you have already acknowledged my identity as the Lord of the Sky? Nie Tian smiled faintly. His calm voice sounded, but it was extremely overbearing. Everyone's expressions slightly froze, but still, no one dared to speak. At this moment, even the people of Seven Despair Devil Palace and Ghost Jail Sect were convinced. Previously, even the people of Sky Sword Martial Sect felt that Nie Tian did not have the qualifications to be the Lord of the Sky. But now, no one had any objections. Good. After a moment, Zhong Mingyu's voice sounded. He took a step forward, came to the sky, and said, Since no one continues to challenge Nie Tian, then I, the Guardian, declare that this time's Sky Martial competition is over. Gue Tongren looked at Zhong Mingyu. Even if his heart was extremely unwilling, there was no other way. Let's go. Ghost Tongren shouted and prepared to leave. The competition in the sky was over. Nie Tian was already the master of the sky. There was no point for the Ghost Jail Sect's people to continue staying here. Gue Tongren's figure moved, leaping into the sky. The other swordsmen of the Ghost Jail Sect followed. Nie Tian, we will meet again. Junzueji looked at Nie Tian and said lightly, then left with Gue Tongren. I hope the next time we meet, it won't be a battle of life and death. Nie Tian looked at the place where Junzueji's figure disappeared and said to himself with a faint smile. He had a feeling that he would meet Junzueji again in a while. He just didn't know if the two of them were friends or enemies at that time. Nie Tian, you shouldn't have spared his life. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nie Tian with a frown and sighed. Wouldn't it be a pity if a genius like him died, just like that? Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly, Perhaps. Zhong Mingyu let out a long breath, but his expression was rather solemn. He knew that Junzueji had an astonishing background. If he returned to the Saint's world and his identity was revealed, it would probably cause an uproar. If Junzueji died at the hands of Nie Tian, it might not be a bad thing for him. Junzueji's identity was complicated. After returning to the Saint's world, what awaited him would be a thorny path. Sir, what should we do with these people? At this moment, Absolute Eagle King arrived beside Zhong Mingyu and looked at the people from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair with heavy killing intent. Do you want to kill them? Zhong Mingyu frowned and asked coldly. Sir, these people are from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair. If we let them go, they will inevitably spread rumors. Why don't we just kill them? Absolute Eagle King's lips curled into a murderous smile as he said coldly. He was originally from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair and had just joined the Heaven Martial Association not long ago. Yet, He actually wanted to kill his companions who had come to the Sky Martial Association with him. Absolute Eagle King, you don't have to worry. Zhong Mingyu naturally knew what Absolute Eagle King was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, "Since you are already a member of the Heaven Martial Association, the Demon Palace of Seven Despair will not dare to touch you." Yes, this subordinate understands. Absolute Eagle King's eyes darkened, and he hurriedly bowed in response. He wanted to kill the people from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair to protect himself. He had betrayed the Demon Palace of Seven Despair, so he was naturally afraid of revenge. Zhong Mingyu's words made him feel much more at ease. Zhong Mingyu nodded and looked at the people from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair. "You can leave now." The swordsmen from the Demon Palace of Seven Despair were astonished. They did not expect Zhong Mingyu to let them leave just like that. "Thank you, Lord." Immediately, someone reacted and hurriedly left after bowing in thanks. They got off lightly. Absolute Eagle King said unwillingly as he watched these people leave. Zhong Mingyu did not care about him. Instead, he turned and locked his gaze on a figure in the distance. He said, "Elder Lu Mu, your injuries are not light. I'm afraid it will be dangerous for you to return alone. I will immediately send someone to send you away." Lu Mu's face was gloomy. He did not thank him and only nodded. He had brought Jun Zueji to participate in the competition in the Sky Martial Association. He originally thought that the Yu Kingsword sect would become famous because of this, but he did not expect the final result to be like this. Not to mention that he was heavily injured. Even Jun Zueji had betrayed him and joined the Ghost Prison sect. He felt that all this was because of one person, and that was Nie Tian. If it were not for Nie Tian's sudden appearance and forcefully suppressing Jun Zueji, the current situation would definitely not be like this. Thinking of this, Lu Mu could not help but glance at Nie Tian. His eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. "Elder Lu Mu, even now, do you still want to kill the master of the Sky Martial Association?" Zhong Mingyu saw Lu Mu's actions and said with a cold smile, "Humph." Lu Mu sneered and said, "Zhong Mingyu, even if I do not want to kill him, do you think those people will tolerate him? The master of the Sky Martial Association has been waiting for millions of years, is actually a transcendent, profound swordsman from the domain. Do you think those people will accept it? If he cannot reach the Oracle Realm, or even higher before entering the Sacred World, then he, the master of the Sky Martial Association, will be the greatest joke in the heavenly martial sacred world. Ha ha ha." At the end, Lu Mu could not help but laugh loudly. He was very arrogant. "Lu Mu, it is not up to you to decide whether those people will accept Nie Tian." Zhong Mingyu frowned and said cold, "It is too early for you to get carried away. Is that so?" Lu Mu sneered and said, "Let's wait and see." Zhong Mingyu's face was gloomy. He did not want to talk nonsense with Lu Mu anymore. He looked at Eternally Merciless and said in a deep voice, "Wu Qing, send him away." Eternally Merciless agreed. His figure moved, and he came to Lu Mu's side. He took Lu Mu and flew into the sky. The two figures directly broke the void and disappeared. "Those people, who are they?" Nie Tian looked in the direction where Lu Mu and Eternally Merciless disappeared. He could not help but frown and look confused. Chapter 34:03 Recovering Divine Sense. Nie Tian, are you all right? Zhong Mingyu could not help but ask when he saw Nie Tian's puzzled face. "I'm fine." Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. He did have a lot of doubts in his heart, but this was not the time to ask about them. Even if he asked, Zhong Mingyu might not tell him. "Nie Tian, the competition in the sky is over. You are now the master of the sky." Zhong Mingyu smiled and said, "I know you have a lot of questions about the master of the sky. But now, what you need most is to recover your martial body. I will give you 3 days. After 3 days, I will send someone to find you. At that time, we will have a good talk. How about it?" "Okay." Nie Tian nodded with a smile and bowed slightly. "Thank you, First Guardian. No need to be so polite. You can call me Senior Brother," Zhong Mingyu said calmly with a faint smile. "Senior Brother?" When Nie Tian heard this form of address, he could not help but stare blankly. He smiled and was confused. "Let's talk in 3 days." Zhong Mingyu did not want to say more. He smiled faintly and said, "Go back and cultivate your martial body now." Okay. Nie Tian was puzzled, but he did not ask further. After agreeing, he turned around and left. Then, Zhong Mingyu let everyone leave and announced that for the next month, all swordsmen did not need to mine sword intent and could have a good rest. Everyone was very happy and left happily. Nie Tian found Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue, and the three left the Sky Sword Seal together. Nie Fenghua was, of course, very happy that Nie Tian had become the master of the sky. He was deeply shocked by Nie Tian's strength. At this moment, he understood that he, as a father, had been left far behind by Nie Tian. Bailey Xingxue's expression was somewhat ugly. When he first saw Nie Tian, he felt that the latter's talent was very terrifying. However, he did not expect Nie Tian to grow so quickly. At that time, he had even made an agreement with Nie Tian that there would be a fated battle. But now, it seemed that this battle was completely unnecessary. Bailey Xingxue wasn't someone who would belittle himself, but he was also aware of his own limitations. If he were to talk about a duel with Nie Tian now, he would really be asking to be humiliated. "Father, Brother Bailey, I still have some matters to take care of, so I'll take my leave first," Nie Tian said to Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue after leaving the Sky Sword Seal. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue nodded at the same time and didn't say anything else. After Nie Tian left, he quickly found Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng. "Nie Tian, you become the master of the sky," Mo Qianjun said excitedly as he saw Nie Tian again. The competition in the sky had just ended, and the news that Nie Tian had become the master of the sky had already spread throughout the sword seal competition in the sky. Mo Qianjun knew that Nie Tian would definitely shine in the competition in the sky, but he didn't expect that Nie Tian would actually become the legendary master of the sky. "I was lucky." Nie Tian smiled faintly, his face calm. "Nie Tian, your realm." Mo Qianjun laughed. The next moment, he suddenly sensed something, and his face froze. He couldn't say a word for a long time. Nie Tian had entered the Sky Sword Seal for less than 10 days, but his realm of swordsmanship had actually reached the transcendent ultimacy realm. This was really terrifying. "I just had some opportunities in the Sky Sword Seal." Nie Tian looked at the shocked Mo Qianjun and smiled faintly. He then looked at Jiu Qiansheng and asked, "How is Jiu Qiansheng?" Mo Qianjun's expression grew grim as he sighed and said, "Jiu Qiansheng's body is recovering, but his divine sense is still in a state of chaos. From the look of it, it's going to be very difficult for him to recover. Don't worry, I have a way to help him recover his divine sense." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Really?" Mo Qianjun was shocked as he exclaimed, "Of course." Nie Tian smiled and flipped his palm. A vortex of divine sense appeared on his palm. "This is..." Mo Qianjun's eyes trembled as he sensed the vortex of divine sense. He was stunned for a long time before he said, "This is Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense." He couldn't believe that Nie Tian had actually found Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense. But how is this possible? Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense had been devoured by the immortal ghost curse. How can Nie Tian find it? Yes. Nie Tian smiled mysteriously. He flipped his palm and directed the vortex of divine sense into Jiu Qiansheng's mind. In the blink of an eye, 9,000 primal chaos divine sense space was attacked. A bright light appeared in the originally dark divine sense space and began to slowly expand, releasing rays of light that illuminated the divine sense space. "Very good." Nie Tian sensed Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense and said with a smile, "His divine sense should recover in a few days." After all, Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense had been devoured for a long time. Even if his divine sense returned, it would still take a few days for it to recover completely. When a vortex of divine sense was fully released and illuminated the entire divine sense space, Jiu Qiansheng would be able to recover completely. Mo Qianjun nodded excitedly when he saw Jiu Qiansheng's dull eyes regain their luster. He could not believe that Jiu Qiansheng, who had lost his divine sense for such a long time, would recover one day. And yet Tian smiled faintly, feeling as if a heavy stone had finally been lifted from his heart. He had found Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense in the eternal night, demonic fox's divine sense space. It was an accident that he had been able to find it. When he was fighting against Jun Zueji, he had forcefully used 2 swords, which had consumed a large amount of mental energy. This had pushed his mental perception to its limit. It was also at that moment that he had found Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense in the eternal night, demonic fox's divine sense space. Squeak! At that moment, the eternal night, demonic fox suddenly popped out and revealed its furry little head. It seemed to be very dissatisfied. Of course, it could sense that Jiu Qiansheng's divine sense had come from it. It was very dissatisfied, but there was nothing it could do. Little fella, you have devoured so many people's divine sense. It is not too much to ask you to hand over one. Nie Tian laughed and pinched the little demonic fox's head. Squeak! The little demonic fox squeaked and shrank back. Mo Qianjun, who was watching from the side, was stunned. He could not react for a long time. Following that, Nie Tian, Mo Qianjun, and Jiu Qiansheng returned to the valley. Now that Jiu Qiansheng's matter was settled, Nie Tian's next priority was to recover his martial physique. He had too many questions about his identity as the master of the sky. Once his martial physique recovered, he would immediately go to see Zhong Mingyu. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. In the valley, Nie Tian stood up. The aura around his body was fierce. His entire body was like an unsheathed sword. Chapter 3404. Chapter 399. Chapter 399, Senior Brother? Yes. Nie Tian's gaze swept over Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng. He smiled and nodded. After 3 days of recovery, Jiu Qiansheng's consciousness had mostly recovered. At the very least, he was like a normal person now. Nie Tian, you are too strong now. Brother Mo and I are far from being able to keep up with you. Jiu Qiansheng looked at Nie Tian and laughed. Mo Qianjun told Jiu Qiansheng everything that had happened recently. Jiu Qiansheng was very touched, and he was very grateful to Nie Tian. If it weren't for Nie Tian, even if he were still alive, he would have been no different from a walking corpse. That kind of life was as good as nothing. Brother Jiu, Brother Mo, no matter how strong I am, we are still best friends, Nie Tian said with a faint smile and a firm look in his eyes. Yes. Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng were moved, and they nodded. Best friends in the world never changed based on strength. It was just like when Nie Tian had returned to the celestial realm from the 3,000 lesser worlds. At that time, Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng were much stronger than him, but the 3 of them were still best friends. Now, Nie Tian was stronger than Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng, so their friendship wouldn't change. Brother Mo, Brother Jiu, during the competition in the sky, I obtained 2 good things. I want to give them to you. Nie Tian suddenly smiled and said mysteriously, What things? Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng were surprised, but they still looked excited. Demonic Dragon Eyes, 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. A pair of black dragon eyes and a dark sword vortex appeared in his palm. What a powerful aura! Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng's eyes trembled when they felt the terrifying aura of the demonic dragon eyes and the 8 Desolation Ghost Prison Sword Seal. Although they didn't know what the Eye of the Demon Dragon and the Ghost Prison 8 Desolation Sword Seal were, they could tell from their auras that these 2 things were terrifying. Brother Jiu, your body originally had the Ghost Mark Demonic Mark, which is compatible with the Demonic Dragon's Eye. Nie Tian faintly smiled and handed the Demon Dragon's eyes to Jiu Qiansheng. So, I'll give this pair of Demon Dragon's eyes to you. This. Jiu Qiansheng was stunned, and he couldn't help but gulp down a mouthful of saliva while his eyes burned with unconcealable desire. He really wanted the Mystic Dragon Eye, but he felt that this gift was a little too precious. Naturally, Nie Tian knew what Jiu Qiansheng was thinking. He laughed and said, Why are you being so polite? This is not the Jiu Qiansheng I know. Brother Nie, since that's the case, then I won't hold back. Zhou Qiansheng's eyes focused, and he calmed down. He reached out and took the demonic dragon eye. His entire body was trembling. Brother Mo, the ghost prison sword seal is for you. Nie Tian smiled faintly and handed the ghost prison sword seal to Mo Qianjun. Mo Qianjun had the great sky sword seal in his body. If he were to fuse it with the ghost prison sword seal, his future achievements would be unimaginable. Thank you. Mo Qianjun didn't stand on ceremony. He took the ghost prison sword seal and smiled faintly. Brother Jiu, Brother Mo, the demonic dragon's eye and the ghost prison sword seal are both very powerful things. Given your current strength, there might be risks if you try to forcefully fuse them. Nie Tian looked at Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng and said, to be on the safe side, you'll have to wait until your strength reaches the Sage Realm before fusing them. All right. Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng looked at each other and nodded. They were smart people, so they could naturally see how powerful the demonic dragon's eye and the ghost prison sword seal were. They had a great desire for power, but they were also people who could control themselves. They wouldn't easily fuse the demonic dragon's eye and the ghost prison sword seal without absolute certainty. Nie Tian nodded with a calm face. He was looking forward to Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng's future growth. Lord Nie Tian. At that moment, a very familiar voice rang out from outside the valley. Yang Gengri. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard the voice. He hadn't expected that Zhong Mingyu would send Yang Gengri to find him. Brother Mo, Brother Jiu, I have something to do. I'll leave first. Then, Nie Tian became cold. He said something to Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng, then walked out of the valley. As expected, he saw Yang Gengri waiting outside. Sir Nie Tian, the first protector invites you. Yang Gengri smiled and bowed respectfully when he saw Nie Tian appear. Back in the Sky Sword Seal, he had saved Nie Tian. It could be said that he had reconciled with Nie Tian. Sir Yang, I'll have to trouble you. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was calm as usual. Then, under Yang Gengri's guidance, Nie Tian headed to another valley. Along the way, Yang Gengri's eyes flickered strangely. He glanced at Nie Tian from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Sir Yang, are you looking for the Eternal Night Fox? Nie Tian asked with a sudden laugh. Yang Gengri was stunned. He was nervous, and his forehead was covered in sweat. He was indeed looking for the Eternal Night Fox. However, he didn't dare to do anything to it. He just wanted to see it again. He had spent a lot of effort to revive the Eternal Night Fox. So, it was understandable that he wanted to see the Eternal Night Fox again. Sir Yang, I'll pretend that I don't know anything about what you've done in the past. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He looked straight at Yang Gengri and said, but brother, from now on, you'd better behave yourself. It's best not to think too much about things that don't belong to you. Of course. Yang Gengri was shocked and nodded. Previously, he had suspected that there must be someone powerful behind Nie Tian. Now, he was even more convinced that Nie Tian must have a powerful background. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said nothing more. Of course, he didn't let the Eternal Night Fox out. He didn't want to leave Yang Gengri with any misgivings. He didn't want the Eternal Night Fox to come out. After a while, Nie Tian arrived outside a valley. Sir Nie Tian, the first guardian is waiting for you inside. Yang Gengri stood behind Nie Tian and bowed. Nie Tian responded and stepped into the valley. Yang Gengri didn't go in. Instead, he stood guard outside. Nie Tian, you're here. In the valley, Zhong Mingyu's voice rang out. Like a ghost, he appeared in front of Nie Tian. First guardian. Nie Tian bowed and smiled faintly. Looking at Nie Tian, Zhong Mingyu examined him with his divine sense and couldn't help but exclaim, I can't believe you recovered from such serious injuries in 3 days. He originally thought that Nie Tian would only be able to recover by half in 3 days. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would be completely healed. Furthermore, his aura was even stronger than before. Such a powerful martial body was astonishing. First guardian, let's talk business. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Nie Tian, I told you, you can call me senior brother. Zhong Mingyu smiled and looked at Niet Tian passionately. Senior brother? Niet Tian was taken aback and looked at Zhong Mingyu with a puzzled expression. In his life, he had never formally acknowledged anyone as his master. Therefore, Zhong Mingyu's senior brother made him feel strange. Chapter 3405. The Five Great Powers, Sacred Heaven Ancestor. Niet Tian's expression changed after hearing Zhong Mingyu say this name. His gaze towards the latter also changed. Previously, he could tell that Zhong Mingyu was protecting him. He also had some guesses about Zhong Mingyu's identity and even thought that Zhong Mingyu might be the Sacred Heaven Ancestor. However, he didn't expect Zhong Mingyu to be the disciple of the Sacred Heaven Ancestor. At this time, Niet Tian suddenly understood why Zhong Mingyu called himself his senior brother. The Sacred Heaven-defying sword that Niet Tian used was comprehended from the tripartite sacred formation, and the formation was given to him by the Sacred Heaven Ancestor. Zhong Mingyu must have thought that Niet Tian was the disciple of the Sacred Heaven Ancestor, so he called himself senior brother. Unfortunately, he guessed wrong. Niet Tian was not the disciple of the Sacred Heaven Ancestor. Although the Sacred Heaven Ancestor gave the tripartite sacred formation to Niet Tian, there was no master-disciple relationship between the two. The truth was that the Sacred Heaven Ancestor was Niet Tian's subordinate. Although the relationship between the Star Sacred Lord and the Star Messengers was not clear, there was a clear master-subordinate relationship. To put it bluntly, the 9 Star Messengers had to listen to the Star Sacred Lord, Niet Tian. HM. Zhong Mingyu saw Niet Tian's reaction and couldn't help but frown. Are you not teacher's disciple? Niet Tian's current reaction was very strange. Moreover, when he said the words Sacred Heaven Ancestor, there was no obvious respect in his eyes. First Protector, I and the Sacred Heaven Ancestor are not master and disciple. Niet Tian became cold and told the story of how he obtained the tripartite sacred formation. Finally, he said, the Sacred Heaven Ancestor taught me, so it is not wrong to say that we are master and friend. So that's how it is. Zhong Mingyu frowned after hearing Niet Tian's story and bitterly smiled. In fact, he wasn't too sure about Niet Tian's identity. The main reason was that Niet Tian was too young, and the Heavenly Ancestor hadn't shown himself for tens of thousands of years. How could he accept a new disciple? Niet Tian, although you and Master aren't truly Master and disciple, he still guided you. You could be considered his disciple in name. Why don't we call each other senior and junior brothers from now on? Zhong Mingyu was silent for a moment before he suddenly looked at Niet Tian with a serious expression. First Protector, are you worried about something? Niet Tian frowned when he saw the worry in Zhong Mingyu's eyes. Niet Tian, you are indeed very smart. Zhong Mingyu's eyes flickered and he let out a wry smile. You are now the master of the sky, but you must not understand what it means to be the Lord of the sky. Senior brother, please speak clearly. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed and the corners of his mouth twitched. Yes. Zhong Mingyu smiled after hearing Niet Tian's change of address. The heart of the sky is a sacred item of the heavens and earth. It doesn't belong to just one power, but 5 great powers. I am in charge of the sky sword martial list. But behind this, there are many open and secret struggles between the great powers. The Heaven Martial Association that I mentioned before is one of the 5 great powers behind the heart of the sky. For many years, there have been many undercurrents between the 5 great powers. However, there is a common agreement between the 5 great powers. Whoever can fuse with the heart of the sky will become the master of the sky. And the master of the sky will become the master of the 5 great powers and unify them. With these words, Zhong Mingyu paused, giving Niet Tian time to accept. Niet Tian's expression darkened after hearing Zhong Mingyu's words. He didn't think that the heart of the sky would have so many complicated powers behind it. The Heaven Martial Association was just one of the 5 great powers. Niet Tian had already seen the strength of the Heaven Martial Association from the attitude of the Absolute Eagle King and the Ghost Tongren. Since the other 4 great powers could share the heart of the sky with the Heaven Martial Association, it was enough to show that the four great powers were not weaker than the Heaven Martial Association. And Nietian, as the master of the sky, would become the master of the five great powers in the future. This was the most important point. The five great powers had always been fighting openly and secretly, and it was difficult to unify them. Even if Nietian had the identity of the master of the sky, how could he unify the five great powers? On the contrary, his identity as the master of the sky would bring him endless danger. Which great power on the same level as the Heaven Martial Association didn't have many experts? Would these experts submit to a martial artist from a domain just because of the identity of the master of the sky? They obviously wouldn't, but they would be wary of Nietian's identity, so they would secretly kill Nietian. This was what Zhong Mingyu was worried about. So he let Nietian become the disciple of the Divine Heaven Ancestor. With the prestige of the Divine Heaven Ancestor, it might cause a certain amount of deterrence to the experts of the other powers, making them even more wary when they make a move. After a moment, Nietian directly looked at Zhong Mingyu and asked, "Senior brother, you mean that if I go to the sacred world, the people of these powers will not tolerate me, right?" "Yes." Zhong Mingyu nodded and said, "The five great powers have always been fighting each other. Your identity as the master of the sky will definitely make you a target for everyone." "Senior brother wants to use teacher's reputation to protect me?" Nietian frowned and continued to ask. "Yes." Zhong Mingyu nodded again and said, "With teacher's reputation, if you are his disciple, even if the other powers want to make a move, they will have to be wary." "Thank you, senior brother." Nietian smiled and bowed to express his gratitude. Although Zhong Mingyu didn't say it clearly from his words, one could tell that the position of the Divine Heaven Ancestor in the five great powers was very high. At this time, Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietian and said, "Nietian, you are now the master of the sky, so you must come with me to the sky martial sacred world." "Now?" Nietian was startled for a moment and asked with a frown. "Yes." Zhong Mingyu slightly nodded and said, "Since you are the master of the sky, the myriad realms can no longer tolerate you. Your future is in the heavenly sacred world." "Senior brother, I still have some things to take care of in the myriad realms. Can you give me some time?" Nietian thought for a moment and asked in a deep voice, "I will give you 3 months. After 3 months, come to the Sky Sword Martial Academy and follow me back to the Sky Martial Sacred World." Zhong Mingyu thought for a moment and said, 3 months is enough." Nietian nodded and smiled. Then he suddenly thought of something and frowned. He asked, "Senior brother, how did you notice me? Did you know about me before I came to the Sky Sword Martial Academy?" He was very puzzled. The person he dealt with before was always eternally merciless. Why did Zhong Mingyu start to protect him as soon as he entered the Sky Sword Martial Academy? Xing Chun. Zhong Mingyu looked at Nietian with a strange gaze. The corner of his mouth rose into a faint smile as he said these 2 words. Xing Chun. Nietian's gaze froze, and he was startled. Chapter 3406. The 9 regions. Nietian looked at Zhong Mingyu with a puzzled expression. His star aura had already been altered. Apart from the Starry Sky Envoys and Starry Sky Lords, only peak Sage Realm experts could sense it. Zhong Mingyu's sudden utterance of the word star surprised Nietian. A long time ago, teacher told me to help him find someone with the aura of star energy. Zhong Mingyu smiled faintly and explained, "At that time, he left a strand of star force in my body. Back then, you had Eternally Merciless bring back a message, saying that you were a star." When Nietian heard this, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He immediately remembered this matter. Back in the Arctic iceberg, Eternally Merciless had taken Nie Fenghua away. In order to ensure Nie Fenghua's safety, Hua Yiru had asked Eternally Merciless to pass a message to the person behind him. Nietian was a star. Nietian didn't know about this at first. It was Hua Yiru who told him about it afterward. Eternally Merciless told this to Zhong Mingyu, and the latter then firmly believed that Nietian was the one Divine Heaven Ancestor was looking for. After that, Zhong Mingyu deliberately let eternally merciless feel the aura of the stars. The latter confirmed that Nye Tian also had the aura of the stars. Only then did Zhong Mingyu truly pay attention to Nye Tian. When Nye Tian came to the Sky Sword Marshal, he noticed that the sacred heaven-defying sword that Nye Tian used actually came from the Tri-Talent Sacred Array. Because he thought that the sacred heaven ancestor had found Nye Tian and accepted Nye Tian as his disciple, he called Nye Tian Junior Brother. Just now, he found out that Nye Tian had never seen the sacred heaven ancestor before. Zhong Mingyu told her everything that had happened and finally smiled. It seems that I found you by chance. Perhaps this is fate. Perhaps. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his face expressionless. Junior Brother, I noticed that the aura of the stars in your body seems to have disappeared. What happened? Then, Zhong Mingyu looked at Nye Tian and asked, Someone left another force in my body and forcefully changed the aura of the stars. Nye Tian didn't hide it and revealed a faint smile. So that's why. Zhong Mingyu smiled and didn't continue asking. In fact, the heavenly ancestor had warned him a long time ago that if he found someone with the aura of the stars, he shouldn't ask too many questions, but he must ensure the safety of this person. Even now, Zhong Mingyu didn't know why Forefather Divine Heaven cared so much about Nye Tian. He didn't know that Sacred Heaven Ancestor was a space messenger. Senior Brother, do you have any authority as the Lord of the Sky? Nye Tian suddenly laughed and looked at Zhong Mingyu with a strange expression. Junior Brother, what do you want to do? Zhong Mingyu asked with a frown when he saw the strange look in Nye Tian's eyes. Most of the swordsmen in the Sky Sword Marshals come from the myriad domains and other realms. If they can't leave the Sky Sword Marshals for the rest of their lives, isn't that the same as imprisoning them here? The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he said, They are all geniuses of the sword principle. Wouldn't it be a pity if they spent their entire lives in the Sky Sword Martial Arts? Do you want to let them go? Zhong Mingyu frowned, his expression unsightly. At the very least, let them freely enter and exit the Sky Sword Marshal, Nye Tian said solemnly. The Sky Sword Martial Arts was a good place, but if they couldn't enter and leave as they pleased, it would be no different from a prison. Nye Tian, your idea is very good, but you are too naive. Zhong Mingyu laughed as a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He asked, Do you know where the sword crystals these swordsmen might go? Nye Tian frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly, his eyes trembled as he said, Could it be the 5 forces? He already knew that the sword crystals produced by the Sky Sword Martial Arts were all sent to the sacred world. Since the 5 forces were the owners of the Sky Sword Martial Arts, these sword crystals obviously belonged to them. Yes. Zhong Mingyu nodded and said, The sword crystals the 5 forces obtain from the Sky Sword Martial Arts every year is enough to support their normal operations. Do you think they will let these swordsmen go? No. Nye Tian frowned and shook his head. These swordsmen were slaves to the 5 forces, slaves that helped them mine sword crystals. How precious were the sword crystals? The 5 forces definitely would not give them up. Let's put this matter aside for now. Nye Tian smiled bitterly and said helplessly. He planned to think about the swordsmen in the Sky Sword Martial Arts after he and Zhong Mingyu went to the sacred world. These swordsmen had already stayed in the Sky Sword Martial Arts for so long anyway. 3 months did not matter. Nye Tian, are you returning to the myriad regions now? At this moment, Zhong Mingyu looked at Nye Tian and asked with a frown. Yes. Nye Tian nodded and said, Senior Brother, don't worry. I will definitely return within 3 months. All right. Zhong Mingyu nodded with a smile and said, I will wait for your return. Thank you, Senior Brother. Nye Tian smiled faintly and nodded. Zhong Mingyu knew that Nye Tian was returning to the myriad regions to settle some matters. He originally wanted the absolute Eagle King, or Yang Gungri, to accompany Nye Tian so that they could protect Nye Tian. However, after thinking for a while, he felt that some matters needed to be handled by Nye Tian himself. Moreover, the absolute Eagle King and Yang Gungri were cultivators of the sacred world. It was inconvenient for them to interfere in the affairs of the myriad regions. Nie Tian did not delay and immediately bid farewell to Zhong Mingyu. Then, he bid farewell to Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qinsheng and went to find Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue. Next, Nie Tian, Nie Fenghua, and Bailey Xingxue left the Sky Sword martial arts and headed to the Myriad regions. Nie Tian and the other two left the Sky Sword martial arts and returned to the Sacred Soul region. Then, they passed through the Sacred Soul Academy and returned to the God-forbidden domain. 3 days later, Nie Tian and the others appeared outside the God-forbidden domain's Nine Heavens mountain range. Nine Heavens mountain range. Nie Fenghua looked down at the Nine Heavens mountain range and was moved. His eyes were moist and he said solemnly, Nie Fenghua, am finally back. Back then, he was expelled from the 9 regions by the Holy Parliament. He did not expect that he would return one day. It had been more than 200 years. Although it was not a long time, to Nie Fenghua, it was as if a lifetime had passed. Father, Yunxiu, how are you? Nie Fenghua looked at Nine Heavens City and murmured softly. Along the way, Nie Tian had already told him everything. The Holy Parliament no longer existed, Huijiushin was dead, and Chiwu Yunxiu had returned. It seemed that everything had gone smoothly and returned to normal. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's face was extremely gloomy and ugly. Nie Tian, are you all right? Bailey Xingxue noticed that Nie Tian's expression was a little strange, and he could not help but frown and ask. I'm fine. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he replied, but his face was even uglier. Ever since the moment he stepped into the God-prohibited domain realm, he had a foreboding premonition. And after he came to the Nine Heavens mountain range, this bad feeling became even stronger. Chapter 3407. The Nie clan. Father, let's return to the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Tian said to Nie Fenghua, feeling uneasy. All right, Nie Fenghua nodded. Seeing Nie Tian's unsightly expression, he felt strange but did not say anything. Then, Nie Tian and the other two headed back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. A moment later, the three appeared outside the Wind and Cloud Palace. However, at this moment, what appeared before the three of them was the most horrifying scene. The entire Wind and Cloud Square was filled with corpses, and a pungent smell of blood filled the entire square. What's going on? Nie Tian was stunned by the scene before him. His eyes instantly turned bloodshot, and after suppressing his emotions for a few seconds, he roared, "Quick, to the palace!" Nie Fenghua was also stunned for a long time before he finally reacted. With a shout, he flew toward the palace. Nie Tian and Bailey Xingxue's eyes trembled, and they quickly followed. The three figures instantly arrived at the Wind and Cloud Palace. An elderly figure was sitting in the main hall, and there were several figures standing on his left and right. Nie Tian. The old man was the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Dao. When he saw Nie Tian appear, his eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in surprise, "Grandfather!" Nie Tian frowned. He took a step forward, and like a ray of light, he arrived beside Nie Dao. "Nie Tian, you're back." Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian, his eyes trembling. He felt as if he was dreaming, and tears flowed down his cheeks. "Father!" At this moment, Nie Fenghua's figure arrived, and he knelt down heavily before Nie Dao. "You're Fenghua?" Nie Dao was stunned. Looking at Nie Fenghua, his old face froze, and he was speechless for a long time. Never in his dreams would he have thought that Nie Fenghua would actually return. "Father, Fenghua is unfilial. I'm late." Nie Fenghua looked at the old face before him and cried out in grief. In that instant, he felt as if his heart was being stabbed by a knife. When he left, Nie Dao was in the prime of his life, but now he was in his twilight years. What had happened in the past 200 years? Big brother. At this moment, the people on the left and right of Nie Fenghua all called out and knelt down together with him. These people were all Nie Fenghua's brothers and clansmen. Nie Fenghua's sudden return made them feel as if they were dreaming. Bailey Xingxue, who was watching from the side, had an ugly expression on his face. He had never imagined that the gathering of the Nie clan would be like this. After a long time, Nie Dao and the others finally calmed down. "Father, what exactly happened? Nie Fenghua's eyes trembled as she looked at Nie Dao. Nie Dao's expression stiffened. He suddenly looked at Nie Tian, choking with sobs, unable to speak. Grandfather, what exactly happened? Seeing Nie Dao's reaction, Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed and his heart sank. Nie Tian, Grandpa has let you down. I wasn't able to protect Miss Mo Rushi. Nie Dao's face was filled with pain and only spoke after a long time. Rushi, Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He immediately felt his blood boil, as if his entire body was on fire. Tears streamed down Nie Dao's face. He didn't know how to answer Nie Tian. Big brother, Nie Tian, let me tell you what happened. At this moment, Nie Feiyu stood up, suppressing the pain in his heart, and told them what had happened. Half a month ago, a group of cultivators in black suddenly appeared in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. They were extremely violent and killed anyone they saw. This group of people eventually captured Nie Dao and the others and forced them to open the ancestral ground of the Nie clan. They promised that as long as Nie Dao opened the ancestral ground, they wouldn't kill anyone from the Nie clan or the Wind and Cloud Alliance, but they broke their promise. After Nie Dao opened the ancestral ground of the Nie clan, the group of people in black still killed the people from the Wind and Cloud Alliance. The corpses outside the hall were the people from the Nie clan and the Wind and Cloud Alliance. In the end, if the people from the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda hadn't arrived, Nie Dao and the others would have been killed as well. Most importantly, the group of people in black took Mo Rushi away. After hearing Nie Feiyu's words, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank, and his eyes turned bloodshot. The aura around his body surged, and he let out a beast-like roar. He already had a premonition that something might have happened to Mo Rushi, but now that he was sure of it, he still couldn't accept it. Nie Tian. When Nie Dao and the others saw that Nie Tian was close to going crazy, they shouted in unison, but they didn't know what to say next. The person who was captured was Mo Rushi, and Mo Rushi was pregnant with Nie Tian's flesh and blood. This kind of pain was unbearable for anyone. After a long time, Nie Tian finally calmed down. His eyes were dark and murderous, like those of a ferocious beast. Nie Tian, I've let you down. I couldn't protect Miss Mo Rushi, Nie Dao said with a sorrowful expression. Grandfather, who captured Mo Rushi? Nie Tian asked in a deep voice, his eyes as vicious as a wolf's. They called themselves the Nine Mystical Cult. Nie Dao frowned and said in a deep voice, Nine Mystical Cult. When Nie Tian heard these three words, killing intent surged in his eyes, and he repeated each word with murderous intent. The people who massacred the Wind and Cloud Alliance and captured Mo Rushi were actually from the Nine Mystical Cult. Nie Tian, do you know the Nine Mystical Cult? Nie Dao asked in shock when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. Of course I do. Nie Tian's face was gloomy, and he said in a cold voice, Not long ago, I killed the Nine Mystical Cult's Emperor Jiuxian. Nie Dao was stunned for a moment, and he said with a face full of shock, That's impossible, right? Among the group of black-clothed people, there was someone called Emperor Jiuxian. Nie Tian frowned, and he said, Perhaps it's the new Emperor Jiuxian. Then, Nie Tian asked about other things. The Wind and Cloud Alliance suffered heavy losses, and more than half of the Nie family was dead. Fortunately, most of the women and children were unharmed. Chiwu Yunxiu and the others were escorted to Tianxing City by the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda. Only Nie Dao and a few others were left in the Nie family, waiting for Nie Tian's return. Grandfather, where's the boundless ghost wilderness? Nie Tian became cold at this moment, and he asked in a deep voice. Before he went to the sword martial sword in the sky, he asked the boundless ghost wilderness to come to the 9 regions to protect the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Since the Wind and Cloud Alliance was in trouble, the boundless ghost wilderness would not be spared. Your friend, Nie Dao's eyes trembled, and he choked for a moment before he said, is dead. Dead? Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he was shocked. Nie Tian, I'm here. At this moment, a deep voice came from outside the hall, and a figure appeared and slowly walked into the hall. Boundless Ghost Wilderness. Nietian suddenly turned around and looked at the boundless ghost wilderness with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He knew that the boundless ghost wilderness would not die. Chapter 34:08. Wipe out his entire family. When Nye Dao and the others saw the boundless ghost desolation, they were shocked and could not believe their eyes. That day, when the 9 profound sex people invaded, they saw with their own eyes that the boundless ghost desolate had perished together with a 9 profound sex cultivator. But why would the boundless ghost desolate appear again? Could it be that in this world, there was really someone who could come back from the dead? Nietian, I'm sorry. I failed to protect the Wind and Cloud Alliance. At this moment, Desolated Ghost came to Nietian's side with a sorrowful expression. Before Nietian left, he had entrusted the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Nye family to him. However, he had failed to protect the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Nye family. He had failed Nietian's trust, so it was easy to imagine the guilt he felt. Ghost Desolate, I know that you have done your best. Nietian had already calmed down and said solemnly. Desolate Ghost Boundless was a person who valued honor and righteousness. He would rather pay with his life than to violate honor and righteousness. He also felt a stabbing pain in his heart for failing to protect the Nye family. How could Nietian blame him? At this moment, what Nietian regretted the most was his own carelessness. Back when he killed Emperor Jiuxian, he had already formed an irreconcilable hatred with the 9 mystical sect. However, he thought that the 9 mystical sect would not cause trouble for the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Unfortunately, the 9 mystical sect still managed to find the Wind and Cloud Alliance. If he had known that this would happen, Nietian would have stayed close to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Rushi, I'm sorry. Nietian blamed himself in his heart and felt deep remorse. Lord Ghost Desolation, are you really not dead? Nye Dao looked at Boundless Ghost Desolation with a stunned expression. He still did not dare to believe it. Lord Alliance Master, it's my fault for not protecting the Wind and Cloud Alliance well. I've implicated you. Desolate Ghost Boundless bowed deeply with a guilty expression. Nye Dao hurriedly helped the Boundless Desolate Ghost up. He sighed and did not say anything else. Regarding the resurrection of the Boundless Desolate Ghost, Nietian was naturally not surprised. Desolate Ghost Boundless was a star monarch. As long as the Forbidden Star Soul was not destroyed, he would not die and could always be reborn. However, Nietian was still somewhat curious about how the Boundless Ghost Desolate had reincarnated. However, this was clearly not the time to think about this. Now, the most important thing in front of Nietian was how to save Mo Rushi. At this moment, Nietian wanted nothing more than to kill his way into the 9 mystical sect and annihilate them from top to bottom. However, he had no idea where the 9 mystical sect was located. The 9 mystery sect was the #1 force in the Sacred Soul region. Furthermore, before the appearance of a 9 tribulation mystic venerate, the 9 mystery sect had disappeared for a long time. If it weren't for Nietian killing Jiuxian and Parian, this force would probably still be lurking. Father, do you know where the 9 profound sect is located? Nietian looked at Nye Fenghua and asked in a deep voice. I don't know. Nye Fenghua shook her head helplessly. The 9 mystery sect had always been a very mysterious force. Although Nye Fenghua had been in the Holy Soul realm for more than 200 years, he had spent most of his time practicing sword techniques in the sky. Hence, he knew very little about the 9 mystery sect. Nietian's face was gloomy. He felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. Although he was very strong now, what use was there if he didn't know where the 9 mystery sect was? However, he would never give up. Even if he had to turn the myriad domain upside down, he had to find the 9 mystery sect. Nietian, I think there's someone who might know where the 9 mystery sect is. Bailey Xingxua suddenly stood up and said while Nietian was at his wit's end. Who? Nietian's eyes lit up as he asked nervously. The emissary. Bailey Xingxua looked at Nietian and uttered a name. President of the Myriad Domain Guild. Nietian's eyes trembled as an unconcealable passion appeared in his eyes. Of course, he knew the name of the emissary. It was the president of the Myriad Domain Guild. Previously, in the Tianqing domain, Niet Tian had met the emissary before. The latter was a sage dragon clan member. Bailey Xingxue nodded and said, when the president was young, he traveled the Myriad domain and challenged the peak experts of each domain. I once heard him say that he had a battle with the leader of the Nine Mystery Sect. Good. Let's go to the Tianqing domain immediately. Niet Tian immediately stood up and shouted. Now that he had a clue, he didn't want to waste any more time. He guessed that since the Nine Mystery Sect had captured Emorushi, they wouldn't do anything to her in the short term. Following that, Niet Tian and the rest didn't waste any time and headed straight for the Tianqing domain. Half a day later, in the main hall of the Myriad Domain Guild's headquarters in the Tianqing domain. You're looking for the Nine Mystery Sect? The emissary stood up abruptly and looked at Niet Tian with a frown. Yes. Niet Tian nodded and bowed. Please tell me the location of the Nine Mystery Sect, Lord President. Niet Tian, are you sure you want to go? Do you know the Nine Mystery Sect? The emissary's face darkened as he scanned Niet Tian with his divine sense. Niet Tian didn't wait for the emissary to finish and interrupted him. Lord President, my pregnant wife has been captured by the Nine Mystery Sect. Even if the Nine Mystery Sect is a mountain of daggers, a sea of fire, a dragon's pond, or a tiger's den, I must go. All right. The emissary fell silent for a moment and finally nodded. The Nine Mystery Sect is in the Tianqing domain, and it's not far from here. Saying that, he threw a map to Niet Tian and said, the Nine Mystery Weapon Valley. Thank you, Lord President. Niet Tian opened the map and fixed his gaze on the Nine Mystery Weapon Valley. After thanking the emissary, he stood up and prepared to leave. Niet Tian. At this time, the emissary's voice sounded again. You have done the Myriad Domain Guild a great favor. I can send 8 rank 9 pseudo-holies to accompany you to the Nine Mystery Weapon Valley. Thank you for your kindness, Lord President, but there's no need for that. Niet Tian turned around and looked at the emissary. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. I alone am enough to destroy the entire Nine Mystery Sect. After saying that, his figure moved and he directly rushed out of the hall. Nie Fenghua was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. She told the emissary to help take care of Nie Dao and the others before rushing out. Desolate, Ghost Boundless, and Bailey Xingxue flew out at almost the same time. Can the 4 of them fight against the entire Nine Mystery Sect? The emissary looked at the place where Niet Tian and the others had disappeared. His face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with worry. The Nine Mystery Sect had many experts. Just the 5 of them were extremely powerful. Even the emissary didn't dare to say that he was a match for the 5 supremes of the Nine Mystery Sect. Therefore, he was very worried for Niet Tian and the others. Of course, he didn't know that not long ago, Niet Tian had already killed the leader of the 5 supremes, the Jiuxian Emperor. After the training in the Sky Sword Martialist, Niet Tian's combat strength had increased by more than 10 times. The current Niet Tian was strong enough to kill the 5 supremes of the Nine Mystery Sect. Half a day later, outside the Nine Mystery Sect's Nine Mystery Sect, 4 violent figures appeared. They were like 4 mountains descending majestically. So this is the Nine Mystery Sect? Niet Tian asked coldly as he looked at the huge ghost-faced mountain gate outside the valley. The corners of his mouth twitched as he spoke. This is the Nine Mystery Sect. The ghost-faced mountain gate in front of him was at least 10,000 meters tall. It was like 2 strange peaks that stood outside the valley and emitted celestial chi. Niet Tian, what are you going to do? Desolate Ghost Boundless frowned as he looked at Niet Tian. Annihilate his entire sect. Niet Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. His entire body was surging with murderous intent. The blood in his body was flowing in reverse. The 7 Despair demonic sword appeared in his hand. In an instant, a towering demon chi overflowed in all directions, filling the space within 10,000 meters. Chapter 3409. A massacre. Boom! High up in the sky, Niet Tian slashed down with his sword. An extremely violent sword will condensed in an instant, and a gigantic sword shadow that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared with a loud rumble. The void rumbled as if the space was about to be torn apart. Rumble! In the next moment, the shadow of the sword fell, and the ghost-faced mountain gate collapsed. In an instant, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Rocks and dirt flew everywhere, and a terrible turbid wave rushed up from the ground. It was like a surging wave, extremely terrifying. Desolate Ghost and the other two couldn't help but tremble when they saw this scene. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. The power of Nietion's sword was really strong and beyond imagination. The ghost-faced mountain gate was incomparably huge, more than 10,000 meters long. Furthermore, it was protected by a protective spell. However, it was actually destroyed by Nietion's sword. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Xingxue had already witnessed Nietion's strength. However, the strength that Nietion displayed now seemed to be even stronger than when he was fighting in the sky. In just a few days, not only had Nietion completely recovered from his injuries, but his strength had also increased. The strength of his martial body was shocking. 9 Mysteries Sex Scum, get out here. After Nietion destroyed the 9 Mysteries Sex mountain gate, the violent chi in his body increased again. He let out a low roar that sounded like a clap of thunder. A few moments later, dozens of figures in black appeared high up in the sky. Each of them looked ferocious, and their auras were wild and oppressive. How dare you? How dare you destroy the 9 Mysteries Sex mountain gate? Courting death. One of the martial artists in black roared as he glanced at Nietion and his group. Before he could figure out the situation, he let out a low roar and charged towards Nietion and his group. Die! Nietion's pupils shrank. Without any nonsense, he raised his hand, and a sword will pierce through the sky. As the sword will landed, the sky was filled with a bloody light. The martial artist didn't even have time to scream before his corpse was destroyed. This person is so strong. When the other black-clothed cultivators saw this, their expressions all changed. They cried out in horror and could not help but retreat. Just now, Nietion's sword had easily killed that cultivator. This caused the others to feel fear in their hearts. Where is the 9 profound sect leader? Nietion's eyes were cold and murderous as he spoke in a low voice. A dense killing intent permeated the air, suffocating everyone. We don't know. The dozens of cultivators were so shocked that their voices were trembling. Their strength wasn't weak, but their status in the 9 mystical sect was very low. They were only guards. How could they possibly know where the 9 mystical sect leader was? Since you don't know, then die. Nietion's expression darkened as he spoke in a cold voice. His silhouette flickered as he slashed out with the 7 extinction demonic sword. Demonic chi whizzed out like a gigantic beast, instantly devouring dozens of cultivators. When Desolate Ghost Boundless and the others saw this scene, their eyes could not help but shudder. They knew Nietion very well. The latter was definitely not someone who would kill indiscriminately. However, this time, Nietion was truly enraged. He wanted to start a massacre. Not only had the 9 mystical sect captured Emorushi, but they had also killed so many people from the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Nye family. The hands of these people were stained with the blood of the Nye family. If Nietion did not kill them, how could he face the souls of the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Nye family? Following that, Nietion's silhouette flickered as he entered the 9 mystical weapon valley. The moment he entered, he could not help but frown. His eyes were sharp and deep, like a wolf's. He could feel the presence of mystical chi in the air, which actually exerted a slight pressure on his martial physique. Nietion, there seems to be something wrong here. Desolate Ghost Boundless also sensed something. He looked at Nietion with a gloomy expression as he cautiously said, I'm not afraid of a mountain of swords or a sea of flames. Nietion said in a low voice. His eyes were incomparably cold. How dare you trespass into the 9 mystical sect? At this moment, a deep voice sounded. Then, hundreds of figures appeared in the sky at the same time. their violent auras linked together like a dark cloud, rolling over. Boom! Nyation frowned, and his body suddenly shook. A terrifying sword aura soared into the sky, condensing into a frightening sword shadow outside his body. Against the momentum, heaven cleaving. Bang! Then, the two terrifying auras collided like two giant beasts. Suddenly, a muffled sound could be heard in the air, and the two auras collapsed at the same time. Nyation's figure was like a mountain, not moving an inch. As for the hundreds of martial artists, they were directly sent flying. Some of the weaker martial artists were even killed by the terrifying aura. Desolate, ghost boundless, and the others were shocked to see this scene. Nyation was too terrifying. These hundreds of martial artists were all pseudo-holies. The weaker ones were third-level pseudo-holies, while the stronger ones were fifth-level pseudo-holies. There were even a few seventh and eighth-level pseudo-holies. Yet, Nyation alone was able to resist the joint aura of hundreds of martial artists, and he could even cause them to collapse. His strength was unimaginable. Die, all of you! At this time, Nyation's figure moved. Like a rainbow, he flew towards the hundreds of martial artists. Wherever his figure passed, blood splattered everywhere. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of ninth Shin martial artists were all killed. The air was filled with an incomparably thick smell of blood, as if it was a land of azura. Nya Tianling stood high in the sky, killing intent surging from his body. His eyes were cold as they locked onto the ground below. He saw that in the valley, tens of thousands of meters away, there were many palaces and pavilions. This was where the 9 mystical sect was located. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. His figure moved in an instant, flying towards the palaces and pavilions. Boom! 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 As soon as Nyation regained his footing, a violent aura shot up into the sky from the ground. Numerous black-robed figures appeared and surrounded Nyation like ferocious gods, emanating a violent killing intent. Good timing. Nyation's eyes swept across the thousands of martial artists in front of him. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was endless killing intent and fighting intent. The corner of his mouth twitched as he said coldly, "Today, no matter how many of you come, I will kill them all. Kill." The eyes of the martial artists in black were filled with killing intent. They roared in unison, and their aura suddenly became wild. In an instant, it exploded like a landslide and a tsunami. A terrifying pressure was released, and it seemed as if it could destroy everything in its path. The combined aura of thousands of pseudo-sage martial artists was enough to make even a sage martial artist feel fearful. However, Nyation's eyes darkened as he released the divine evolution spirit from within his body. His entire body's sword aura surged, and his sword was pushed to the extreme. An aura like that of a raging dragon was released, and it rushed towards the terrifying pressure in the air. Boom, boom, boom. In the next instant, the two powerful auras collided with each other. The air shook, and it seemed as if the world was about to be destroyed. Chapter 34:10. Can you stop them? Nyation had single-handedly resisted the combined aura of thousands of pseudo-sage powerhouses. Even though his martial body was strong and his sword was shocking, he could only be evenly matched. After all, that was the combined aura of thousands of pseudo-sage powerhouses. If others were to see this scene, they would definitely be dumbfounded. It was no exaggeration to say that in the entire myriad domains, only Nyation could resist the combined aura of thousands of pseudo-sage powerhouses. Even the leader of the myriad domains, Zhenjue Run, who had the identity of a sage realm dragon tribe member, could not resist the combined aura of thousands of pseudo-sage powerhouses. This was the terrifying power of the alliance of martial artists. Moreover, these martial artists from the 9 mystical sect had a tacit understanding with each other. Once they joined forces, they would be able to resist the powerful invaders. It was a pity that the person they were facing this time was a freak. Nyation. Rumble. High up in the sky, The combined aura of thousands of pseudosage powerhouses surged violently into the sky. A terrifying force exploded in the space like a surging dark cloud, enveloping the earth. But below, a soared aura that resembled a giant of the heavens, and earth forcibly blocked the violent dark clouds. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, 3 terrifying attacks appeared like hurricanes, rushing into the terrifying dark cloud, stirring it up and causing the void to tremble even more violently. This is the time. Nyetian felt the pressure from above was somewhat chaotic. The corner of his mouth twitched coldly as the 9 dragon veins in his body began to revolve crazily. Waves of dragon chi were released, condensing into a giant crimson dragon in the air. The power of thunder was vast and mighty, as if it wanted to destroy everything. Kill! In the next moment, he roared. Suddenly, the void shook, as if the world was about to explode. Rumble. Bang, bang, bang. Then, under the double impact of the sword force and the giant dragon, the dark cloud could no longer hold on. It suddenly collapsed and turned into terrifying waves that rushed into the sky. Not good. Thousands of martial artists from the 9 mystical sect instantly felt that something was wrong. Many of them screamed in horror, their hearts filled with the threat of death. Retreat. At this time, someone reacted and roared. His figure instantly retreated. The others immediately began to retreat. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, terrifying waves of energy spread out in all directions. They were like wild beasts that swallowed everything in their path. At the same time, Nyetian's figure soared into the sky. The 7 ultimate demon sword in his hand slashed through the air. Wherever the sword's edge passed, tens of thousands of sword silhouettes shot out in unison. It was as if a scorching sun was releasing its rays, charging out in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. The impact of the waves, coupled with the killing sword shadows, caused the void to tremble. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. A while later, the chaotic space regained its calm. The sky was clear, but it was shrouded in a strong scent of blood. The few thousand warriors from the 9 mystical sect had completely disappeared. Not even their bones were left. Nyetian stood in the air with a murderous look on his face. His eyes were deep and cold, as if he was a demon that had walked out of hell, killing thousands of pseudo-sacred martial artists in one go. One could imagine how terrifying Nyetian's strength was. Nyetian. At this moment, Desolate Ghost and the rest came to Nyetian's side with shock written on their faces. However, Nyetian's face was still dark as he suddenly turned around and looked at the sky. Heavenly Evil Monarch, 9 Tribulation Xian Sovereign, and 2 Grasshoppers. Why aren't you guys coming out? MHM, Desolate Ghost, and the rest squinted their eyes as they looked at the sky. However, they did not see anyone. As Nyetian's voice rang out, the void remained silent. There was no response. Since you guys aren't coming out, then I can only make a move myself. A hint of cold, killing intent appeared at the corner of Nyetian's mouth. As soon as he uttered these words, he raised the 7 Absolutes demon sword, and a torrential stream of demon chi shot out of it, which rapidly condensed into a ghostly claw in the air. Kaboom! At the place where the ghostly claw landed, a cracking sound rang out in the air. The space actually split apart as a black figure appeared and slammed out with a palm. The palm was like a mountain, blasting towards the terrifying ghostly claw. In the next moment, the 2 forces clashed and collapsed at the same time. However, the black-clothed silhouette was forced to retreat under the terrifying impact. Poof! When he stabilized his silhouette, his face was dark as his face turned red. His body trembled as he spewed a mouthful of blood. Heavenly Evil Monarch, you're finally out. With a smile, Nyetian looked at that pathetic silhouette with a cold arc rising on the corner of his lips. His eyes were akin to a wolf's, with a venomous light flickering in them. Nyetian, how did you become so powerful? The Heavenly Evil Monarch's face was as pale as paper as he looked at Nyetian in shock as his voice trembled. The last time he saw Nyetian, the latter was on the same level as him. At most, Nyation was slightly stronger than him. But right now, a casual slash from Nyation could heavily injure him. Furthermore, he couldn't understand how he was discovered by Nyation when he was hiding. How did Nyation possess such terrifying perception? It's not that I'm too strong, but you're too weak. Sweeping a glance at the heavenly evil monarch, Nyation snickered before he looked in another direction and coldly said, "The few of you are still not coming out?" His roar caused space to tremble as if it was about to explode. Shortly after, 3 silhouettes appeared in the sky. All of them were donned in black with a terrifying aura surging around them. 9 Tribulation Venerable. Looking at one of the black-clothed cultivators, Nyation coldly called out the other party's name. "I spared your life the last time, but this time you will die. Is that so?" The 9 Tribulation Venerable sneered without any fear. "Nyation, even if your strength has increased, it's impossible for you to confront the 4 great sovereigns." The 4 great sovereigns. Nyation smiled in disdain as he swept a glance at the 9 Tribulation Venerables group and said in a cold tone, "In my eyes, you're just 4 ants. Come at me together." The 4 people before him were the 4 great sovereigns of the 9 profound sect. The 9 Tribulation Venerable, the 9 Heavens Evil Venerable, the 9 Sons Heavenly Venerable, and the 9 Knights Dark Venerable. If Emperor Joshua was included, the 5 great sovereigns would be gathered. But it was a pity that Emperor Joshua was killed by Nyation. Although the 4 great sovereigns of the 9 profound sect gathered together, they were nothing in Nyation's eyes. If it was in the past, the 4 great sovereigns would pose a great threat to him. But now, they were nothing in his eyes. What an arrogant brat. At that moment, the 9 Son Heavenly Venerate took a step forward. His body released a blinding light, and a huge, vigilant Buddha condensed around him. He growled and said, "Your strength is indeed terrifying, but even if the 4 of us can't kill you, we can at least stop you." Chapter 34:11. Killing you like a dog, can you stop me? Nyation's low roar resounded like thunder in the ears of the 9 Sons, Heavenly Sovereigns, and the others. Their expressions flickered simultaneously, especially the 9 Sons, Heavenly Sovereign, who was the closest to Nyation. His eyes trembled with shock in his heart. He sensed an incomparably frigid killing intent from Nyation, which actually made him feel a great threat. He couldn't believe that the aura of a pseudo-sacred martial cultivator at the 8th stage could make him feel bone-chilling cold. Heavenly Sovereign, don't be careless. That brat's strength is unusual, and you can't treat him as an ordinary cultivator. The heavenly evil monarch's silhouette flashed as he appeared beside the 9 Sons' Heavenly Sovereign. Nyation's sword had heavily injured him. While he was shocked, he was also more fearful and cautious at the same time. This Heavenly Sovereign understands. The 9 Son Heavenly Venerate agreed. His lips curled into a cold smile, and his expression changed. He shouted, 9 Mystic Array, activate! Boom, boom, boom. At the same time as his voice rang out, the ground in the surroundings began to shake, following which numerous boulders shot up into the sky from underground. They were like giants that stood majestically between the heavens and earth, sealing off the surrounding space-time. MHM? Nyation frowned and couldn't help but ask in confusion. Then, he sneered and said, "It seems that you're prepared. Brat, this is the 9 Mystic Sects Sect-Protecting Array. You won't be able to escape today." The 9 Sons Heavenly Sovereign laughed coldly as the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. His killing intent was heavy. Really? Nyation smiled as his silhouette moved and slashed his sword out. Instantly, the sword was akin to a dragon as it flew towards one of the boulders. At this moment, Nyation finally saw that those boulders were actually tombstones. The huge tombstone was more than 100,000 meters tall. It was covered in dense runes, making it look extremely sinister. Boom! Just as Nyation's sword shadow was about to hit the tombstone, the 9 profound magical symbols on the huge tombstone started to swirl madly and condense into a black hand that shot out with a loud rumble. blocking the sword shadow's attack. When Nyetian saw this, his expression changed and his eyes narrowed. Nyetian, don't force your way in. This Nine Mysteries great formation draws support from the power of heaven and earth. It's impossible for you to break through it directly. The Ghost Emperor's voice resounded. The Nine Profound Grand Formation was connected to the heavens and the earth, and it was formed by drawing support from the might of the heavens and the earth. Thus, one could well imagine how powerful it was. Although Nyetian was powerful, it was simply impossible for him to directly break the Nine Profound Grand Formation. Based on the Ghost Emperor's judgment, the Nine Profound Formation in front of him was comparable to the Heaven Punishment City's Heaven Punishment Formation. The Nine Mystical Sect Protective Array was indeed extraordinary. Brat, the Nine Profound Grand Formation has been activated. Even if you are a sage, you won't be able to break through it. The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign laughed coldly. His eyes were cold and filled with murderous intent. Yet Tianling sneered. Then, his body moved like a beam of light, rushing towards the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign. Boom! In midair, he slashed out with his sword. The violent sword shadow exploded with a terrifying aura. Like a tsunami, it pressed down on the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign. The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign was one of the 5 supreme martial artists of the Nine Mystical Sect. His strength was second only to the Jioshuan supremacy. You are too naive to think that you can kill me just like that. The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign roared and struck out with his palm. Suddenly, the void trembled as a terrifying palm shadow appeared, causing the void to tremble violently. Within the Nine Profound Grand Formation, the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign strength was multiplied several times. His palm strike could split mountains and split oceans. In the next moment, the palm and sword clashed together, causing space to tremble with boundless shockwaves spreading out. The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign retreated a few hundred meters with his eyes trembling as he looked at Nyetian. He had never expected that he would be at such a disadvantage in a head-on battle against Nyetian in the Nine Profound Mysteries Grand Formation. Heavenly Sovereign, are you all right? The Heavenly Evil Monarch and the rest nervously took a step forth. Nyetian was too terrifying. Even under the suppression of the Nine Profound Grand Formation, he could still force the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign back with a single sword. I'm fine. The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign hollered as he swept his gaze at the boundless Ghost Sovereign and Cold Sovereign. I will hold that brat back. You guys go and kill those 3. Roger. The Heavenly Evil Monarch and the other 2 acknowledged with their heads lowered. Their gazes sank as they locked onto the boundless Ghost Sovereign and the other 2. In the next moment, the 3 of them moved and flew towards the boundless Ghost Wasteland. However, Nyetian paid no attention to them. He believed that the boundless Ghost Sovereign and the other 2 were sufficient to deal with the 3 sovereigns. His eyes flickered with a venomous light as he looked at the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign. He could sense an aura similar to the Nine Profound Grand Formation coming from this person. Evidently, the Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign was the key to breaking the Nine Profound Grand Formation. Brat, you want to kill this Heavenly Sovereign? The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign looked at Nyetian with a cold smile on his lips. But it's a pity that no one can kill this Heavenly Sovereign in the Nine Profound Grand Formation. Heavenly Sovereign? Nyetian's gaze sank as he sneered with disdain in his eyes. Killing you is akin to slaughtering a dog. Boom! As the sound of his voice faded, a terrifying sword chi gushed out from his body. The chi could devour the heavens. It was incomparably terrifying. Following that, his sword chi crazily increased. It was as sharp as a blade. It was as if there was a hurricane formed from sword chi outside his body. How is this possible? The Nine Suns' Heavenly Sovereign suddenly sensed that Nyetian's sword intent had become stronger. It actually made him feel pressured. He couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Heavenly Sovereign, is it? At that moment, Tianling laughed and raised the 7 Despair demon sword in his hand. Instantly, endless demonic aura and sword intent gathered in the void, forming a frightening demonic sword shadow. The demonic aura was suddenly released, causing the void to tremble violently. The Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign's eyes trembled. He instantly sensed the aura of death. He screamed in horror and wanted to resist, but it was too late. Boom! In the next instant, the massive sword shadow descended. The Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign didn't even have the chance to resist before he was swallowed whole. Not even his bones were left. One of the 5 sovereigns of the Nine Profound sect, the mighty Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign, had died tragically. Even at the moment of his death, he still couldn't understand how Nyetian could instantly unleash such terrifying power. Nyetian was a man of his words. Killing him was akin to slaughtering a dog. That fellow is too stupid. Since he can absorb energy from the Nine Profound Array, that means that he's one with the array. The Ghost Emperor's voice resounded with a sneer. Isn't he courting death by being so arrogant with such an obvious array core? That's right, the Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign was the array core of the Nine Profound Array, and the Nine Profound Array would collapse by itself if he was killed. He must have never expected that Nyetian had already seen through this before he had made a move against him. He was too confident and thought that Nyetian couldn't kill him with his strength. This was the reason why he sent the heavenly evil monarch and the rest to kill Desolate Ghost's group. Chapter 34:12. Brutal means. Rumble. When Nyetian killed the Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign with a single sword, the Nine Profound Array was instantly destroyed. Tombstones started to fall from the sky, causing chaos in space. Standing in midair, Nyetian suddenly turned around and fixed his eyes on the other 3 paragons, which were filled with killing intent. The heavenly evil monarch and the rest were initially fighting with Desolate Ghost's group. When they saw the Nine Profound Array collapsing, their faces instantly changed. When they turned around and saw that the Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign was killed, the shock in their hearts was magnified in their eyes. Never in their wildest dreams did they imagine that the Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign, who was ranked second amongst the 5 sovereigns, would be killed by Nyetian. I'll kill you first. At this moment, a cold smile appeared at the corner of Nyetian's mouth. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he locked onto the dark Exalt 9 Knights. He said coldly, and his figure flashed out in an instant. At this moment, he had already activated the Sky Evolution Saint Soul, and his Sword Dao had reached the first level of Sword Rhyme. As the 7 Extinction Demonic Sword slashed out, the sword streaked across the sky with a sword radiance that seemed like it could split the heavens and earth apart. You, the Nine Suns' heavenly sovereign, who was fighting with Bailey Shengxue, suddenly felt a terrifying sword intent coming from his back. Turning around, he exclaimed when he saw Nyetian. Boom! However, at this moment, a terrifying sword shadow descended and engulfed the Dark Lord of the 9 Knights. With a single sword, another sovereign was killed by Nyetian. When the heavenly evil monarch and 9 Tribulation Venerable saw this scene, their eyes trembled with shock on their faces. They were speechless. At this moment, Nyetian was too terrifying, and it wasn't something that they could imagine. Let's go. In the next moment, the heavenly evil monarch and 9 Tribulation Sovereign exchanged a look and had the same thought in their hearts. Leave. They couldn't stop Nyetian, and staying here would only be courting death. The 2 of them moved in an instant like 2 streams of light. Escape. Nyetian's eyes darkened and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Do you think you can escape? As he spoke, he stomped his feet and soared into the sky. He was akin to a dragon breaking out of the abyss with sword intent surging around him. The 7 Extinction Demonic Sword slashed down, causing space to tremble. Instantly, 2 swords appeared like 2 ghostly hands that grabbed towards the heavenly evil monarch and 9 Tribulation Sovereign. In the blink of an eye, the heavenly evil monarch and 9 Tribulation Profound Sovereign were restrained. They couldn't even resist. Nyetian's figure moved and appeared before the heavenly evil monarch and the 9 Tribulation Mystic Sovereign. Nyetian, why you want to kill us? The Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable's eyes were trembling, and his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He was obviously terrified. He had never expected that the appearance of the four paragons at the same time would be so easily defeated by Nietian in the blink of an eye. In front of Nietian, the four supreme beings were nothing more than ants. Since you're so afraid, then I'll kill you first. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nietian's mouth. Then he stretched out his hand, and the ghost hand in midair suddenly tightened its grip. The raging pressure even caused the void to tremble slightly. Under the immense pressure, the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable felt that his entire body was about to be torn apart. His face was filled with pain, and even his facial features were distorted. He never expected that Nietian would use such a cruel method to deal with him. You'll die a painful death. A cold smile rose on the corner of Nietian's lips as he spoke. His eyes flickered with a cold light, and his entire being seemed sinister and dark. The Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable opened his mouth wide, but the immense pressure made it difficult for him to even speak. Following that, a bloody scene unfolded. The Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable's body was torn apart bit by bit, and he was instantly covered in blood. Such a scene was extremely shocking and bloody. The void was filled with the stench of blood. At that moment, the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable felt that his flesh, bones, and meridians were being torn apart bit by bit, but he had no strength to resist. Nietian. Nie Fenghua suddenly looked at Nietan, not knowing why the latter would use such a method to torture the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable. Nietian's eyes were cold, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He looked like a devil from hell. The heavenly evil monarch watched as the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable was slowly torn apart. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. It turned out that Nietian had such a cruel side. It's about time. I'll send you on your way. After a long time, when the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable was left with only a trace of his aura, Tianling sneered and suddenly clenched his hand. The Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable's body trembled, and he directly turned into a bloody light in the air. Nietian raised his palm, and a dark vortex appeared in his palm. The soul aura was extremely dense. It was the myriad tribulation saint soul in the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable's body. The reason why he tortured the Nine Tribulations' mystic venerable was to obtain the myriad tribulation saint soul. However, that wasn't his main motive. He had another motive, which was to show the heavenly evil monarch. Storing the myriad tribulation saint's soul in his hand, Nietian raised his head and swallowed it. He had already fused with the sky evolution saint's soul, and now he was going to fuse with the myriad tribulation saint's soul. This way, he would have two types of saint's soul in his body. Seeing how ferocious Nietian was, the heavenly evil monarch's eyes trembled. He was shocked. When the myriad tribulation saint's soul entered his body, Nietian's body surged with violent energy and his aura soared. However, he wasn't bothered by it as his cold eyes locked onto the heavenly evil monarch. Sensing the killing intent in Nietian's eyes, the heavenly evil monarch's face turned pale. What are you trying to do? Heavenly evil monarch, from now on, you will answer my questions. If your answer isn't what I want, I guarantee that your death will be 100 times more miserable than a Nine Tribulations mystic venerable. Nietianling sneered with killing intent in his eyes. The heavenly evil monarch's eyes trembled as he nodded his head. Good. With a satisfied smile, Nietian asked, was it the Nine Profound sect that killed those from the Wind and Cloud Alliance and Nye family? Yeah. The heavenly evil monarch gulped down a mouthful of saliva as he nodded his head. The one that captured my wife was also from a Nine Profound sect, right? Nietian's eyes narrowed with rage blazing in his eyes that seemed like they would explode at any moment. The heavenly evil monarch nodded his head once more with his face frozen. He was speechless. My wife, where is she? Nietian's face turned cold as his killing intent intensified. He was akin to a sharp blade that could kill at any moment. She was taken away by the sect master. I have no idea where she is. The heavenly evil monarch's eyes trembled with his teeth chattering. Where's the 9 profound sect master? Nyetion's eyes blazed with killing intent as he asked. The sect master is... The heavenly evil monarch's eyes trembled as he started to hesitate. Where? Nyetion roared as a terrifying aura permeated from his body. Shortly after, 9 bone-corroding soul-shackling chains were unleashed. They were akin to 9-headed snakes that made him look extremely dark. In the 9 profound, forbidden ground, the heavenly evil monarch's eyes trembled as he subconsciously exclaimed when he sensed the aura coming from the bone-corroding soul-shackling chains. Chapter 34:13. The 9 Great Protectors. Up in the sky, Nyetion's face was grim with a cold light flickering in his eyes, as if he wanted to devour someone. He had immediately released 9 bone-corroding soul-shackling chains to bind the heavenly evil monarch. At this moment, he could instantly kill the heavenly evil monarch with a single thought. When the heavenly evil monarch heard that Nyetion wanted to head to the 9 profound forbidden ground, his eyes trembled with panic on his face. Let's go. The corner of Nyetion's lips twitched as he coldly spat out a single word. His eyes were cold to the extreme, as if they could freeze someone in an instant. The heavenly evil monarch's throat trembled. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not speak. He had no doubt that if he dared to speak anymore, Nyetion would kill him without any hesitation. Thereafter, Nyetion's party was led by the heavenly evil monarch to the most mysterious place in the 9 profound sect, the 9 profound forbidden ground. When Nyetion's party landed, 9 silhouettes appeared with majestic auras. They were all 9th order quasi-saints, and judging from their auras, they weren't any weaker than the heavenly evil monarch's party. Looking at the 9 silhouettes, Nyetion couldn't help knitting his brows. He never expected that a mere 9 profound sect would have so many experts. The 5 sovereigns could be considered as pinnacle powerhouses in the Myriad Domain Alliance, and these 9 people were even stronger than the 5 sovereigns. Furthermore, Nyetion had killed hundreds and thousands of quasi-saints. With such strength, the 9 profound sect was definitely one of the pinnacle forces in the Myriad Domain Alliance. Brad, who are you? At this time, a white-robed old man walked out of the group of 9. He seemed to be the leader of the 9. He looked at Nyetion with an incomparably gloomy gaze and asked coldly. He actually did not pay any attention to the heavenly evil monarch. Instead, his attention was focused on Nyetion. It's as if he didn't know the heavenly evil monarch. I want to enter the 9 profound forbidden ground, Nyetion coldly said with a domineering aura. He stood in the sky like an ice mountain. Impudent. When the other person heard Nyetion's words, he growled in a low voice and said in a cold tone, "The 9 profound forbidden ground is our 9 profound sect's most sacred ground. Other than the sect leader, no one else can enter. Who do you think you are to be worthy of entering the 9 profound forbidden land?" Oomph. Almost at the same time, another person stood out and said with a cold smile, "With us, the 9 great protectors, no one is allowed to take half a step into the 9 profound forbidden area." 9 protectors, so you guys really exist. When the heavenly evil monarch heard those words, his eyes trembled as he exclaimed. Actually, the appearance of these 9 people in front of him also surprised him. He never knew that the 9 mystical sect had 9 such powerful existences. However, he didn't expect that these 9 people were actually the 9 mystical sect's 9 great guardians. Even though he was one of the 5 supremes of the 9 mystical sect, he had never seen the 9 great protectors before. In the 9 mystical sect, the 9 great protectors were existences that only existed in legends. It was rumored that the 9 great protectors were existences that existed when the 9 mystical sect was established. The 9 of them were trained by the first 9 mystical sect leader with a special technique, granting them an undying body. The 9 of them had already surpassed the limits of a deity realm cultivator, and it was said that they were tens of millions of years old. However, no one from the Nine Mystical Sect had ever seen the Nine Great Protectors. It was so much so that even the Heavenly Evil Monarch had never seen them before. The Heavenly Evil Monarch had always thought that the Nine Great Protectors were just legends. But who could have expected that the Nine Great Protectors would appear today? Furthermore, all 9 of them appeared together. But looking at the 9 Great Protectors, they didn't seem as terrifying as the legends made them out to be. You think you can stop me? Nietion's gaze swept across the 9 protectors. His eyes were filled with coldness, and his killing intent was extremely sharp. Brat, you're too arrogant. The white-robed old man, the leader of the 9 sect protectors, let out a cold laugh. He took a step forward and reached out with his hand. Instantly, an enormous force appeared. It was as if an invisible hand had appeared and grabbed towards Nietion. Oof. You're the arrogant one. Tianling sneered as his body trembled. A surge of sword intent was unleashed that shattered the invisible force. Bang! In the next moment, a muffled explosion resounded as the leader of the 9 protectors was forced back 10-odd meters. How is this possible? The leader of the 9 protectors immediately stabilized himself with his eyes trembling. He wasn't injured, but he was in a pathetic state. He hadn't expected Nietion to be so powerful. Not only had he broken his palm strike with ease, but he had even pushed him back. His strength was truly terrifying. The leader of the 9 protectors had lived for tens of millions of years, and he initially thought that he was invincible in the Myriad domain. But he never expected that such a young cultivator would be able to push him back so easily. Big brother. At the same time, the 8 protectors exclaimed with shock and fear on their faces. They never expected that there would be such a terrifying existence in the Myriad domain that a single sword intent could push back their big brother, the leader of the 9 protectors. The 9 of them were the 9 protectors of the 9 profound sect, and they've lived together for tens of millions of years. They were even closer than their own flesh and blood, and they even addressed each other as brothers. Under the orders of the first 9 profound sect master, they guarded the 9 profound forbidden ground for tens of millions of years without taking a step out. They never expected that there would be someone in the Myriad domain that could cultivate to such a terrifying level. 9 protectors, this brat's strength is unusual, and you can't underestimate him. At this moment, the Heavenly Evil Monarch yelled out, "You're courting death." Nietion's gaze sank with killing intent gushing out from his eyes. With a twitch of his lips, the 9 bone-corroding soul-shackling chains pierced through the Heavenly Evil Monarch's body. The Heavenly Evil Monarch's face froze as he widened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he no longer had the opportunity. Bang! In the next moment, the 9 bone-corroding soul-shackling chains tore the Heavenly Evil Monarch apart with a crimson radiance. It was so much so that even his heavenly evil profound meridians were shattered by the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. The arrogant heavenly evil monarch had died just like that. The sight of this bloody scene caused the eyes of the 9 sect masters to widen. Apprehension appeared in their eyes as they looked at Nietion. Not only was Nietion powerful, but his methods were also ferocious. Furthermore, his character was terrifying, unlike a young cultivator. At this moment, they finally understood how terrifying Nietion was. However, they wouldn't take a step back. They would definitely not allow Nietion to enter the 9 profound, forbidden ground. Nietion, do you still remember this emperor? At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in the sky. Then, a black-robed figure descended from the sky. Chapter 34:14. Night descends. Emperor Jiuxian. Looking at that black-clothed silhouette, Nietion's eyes couldn't help trembling with shock. Although Supremacy Jiuxuan had changed his appearance, his aura hadn't changed at all. Nietion was confident that this black-clothed cultivator was Emperor Jiuxian. He never expected that the person before him would be Emperor Jiuxian. Back in the Saint Soul Academy, Emperor Jiuxian was clearly killed by him. So why would he appear here? Nietion, are you surprised to see this emperor again? Emperor Jiuxian sneered as he looked at Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly as he sensed something. The corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. With a cold smile, he said, "So you're from the Spirit Devourer clan, Monarch Jiuxian. It seems that the one I killed was only your host." MHM? Emperor Jiuxian knitted his brows. He was briefly stunned with unconcealable shock in his eyes. He had concealed the aura of the Soul Devourer ghost curse perfectly, so why could Niet Tian sense it? Niet Tian was right. He was from the Soul Devourer clan. Back when Niet Tian had been the Holy Soul Academy, he had only killed one of 9 profound sovereigns' host bodies. The Soul Devourer ghost curse in Emperor Jiuxian's body was extremely powerful, but he controlled it well to conceal the aura of the Soul Devourer ghost curse with his other bloodline powers. So when Niet Tian first encountered him, he couldn't sense the aura of the Soul Devourer ghost curse. But at this moment, with the Eternal Night Demon Fox, Niet Tian's perception had undergone a qualitative increase. Even if Emperor Jiuxian had concealed the aura of the Soul Devourer ghost curse perfectly, it couldn't escape from Niet Tian's perception. Back then, Emperor Jiuxian's death made Niet Tian feel weird. The leader of the 5 sovereigns was actually weaker than the heavenly evil monarch and the rest. It turned out that the person who had appeared that time was just a host body of sovereign Jiuxian. Niet Tian, the current you is indeed very strong. However, the foundation of our 9 mysterious sect is not something you can imagine. Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan calmed down, and his eyes darkened. He looked at Niet Tian and said, "Even if you have the strength of a saint today, don't even think about leaving here alive." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden explosion in the sky. Immediately, a powerful force descended like a curtain that covered the sky. In the blink of an eye, the world fell into darkness, and the day turned into night. The sudden turn of events caused Niet Tian to frown as his expression flickered involuntarily. He sensed that there was an extremely terrifying dark energy in the void, and it made him feel slightly suffocated. Niet Tian, this is the Dark Night enchantment. Enjoy the darkness. Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan's voice sounded in the void. It was deep and powerful, and it seemed to be coming from all directions, causing the void to tremble. Niet Tian frowned, and his eyes were filled with a cold light, like a wolf's eyes. He did not expect Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan to be able to open such a huge enchantment in the blink of an eye. Niet Tian, you came earlier than I expected. Fortunately, I set up the enchantment in advance. At that moment, Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan's voice sounded again, and it was cold and mournful. Today, you are destined to be devoured by the night. Night? Niet Tian's eyes darkened, and he seemed to understand something. His eyes trembled, and he said cold, "Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan, it seems that you have many identities. You are actually a person of the night. Niet Tian, you are indeed very smart, much smarter than I expected." Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan sneered and said, "I am indeed a person of the night, and I am the master of the night, the Black Emperor. Do you remember the Night Monarch that you killed? He is this emperor's sworn brother. Moreover, you've killed one of my hosts. This time, we will settle our old and new debts together." A voice that was cold and murderous came from all directions and resounded in the void. It seemed eerie and strange. When Niet Tian heard Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan's voice, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he revealed a cold smile. Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan of the 9 Mystic Sect was actually the Master of the Night, the #1 assassin organization in the Myriad Territories. This was something he had not expected. The Night Monarch was extremely powerful in the Myriad Territories, comparable to the Myriad Territory Guild. However, the Master of the Night Monarch was only one of the 5 supreme venerables of the 9 Mystic Sect. This showed that the 9 Mystic Sect was a truly powerful force. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the 9 Mystic Sect was the #1 force in the Myriad Territories. The enchantment of the night that Sovereign Venerable Jiuxuan had opened was very terrifying. The enchantment was filled with the power of darkness, like maggots in one's bones, as if it wanted to devour people directly. However, for Nietion, the enchantment of the night was not a death trap. With the demon fox of eternal night and the ghost emperor around, it would not be difficult for him to find the eye of the enchantment. Nietion, prepare to die. At this moment, sovereign venerable Jioshuan's voice was heard again, and it was deep and murderous. Hee. In the next moment, as soon as his voice fell, a shrill and eerie laughter suddenly came from the void, as if thousands of ghosts were wailing in pain. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, Nietion felt a huge wave of dark murderous chi rushing towards him. The sudden burst of momentum was like a landslide and a tsunami. Watch out! Nietion reacted instantly, and with a low roar, he slashed out with the seven despair demon sword in his hand. The shadow of the sword surged like a dragon, blasting towards the endless dark murderous chi. Boom! 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 At the same time, Huang Wujiang and the others made their moves too. A series of terrifying attacks were launched, causing the rift to tremble. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Following this, a piercing sound could be heard. Nietion's eyes flickered slightly as he saw countless ghostly faces emerging from the dark murderous chi, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws ferociously. They were able to devour their attacks. Nietion, what the hell are those? Desolate Ghost also saw those ghostly faces. His eyes couldn't help but tremble as he asked in a startled voice. Their vision was limited to a range of around 10 meters within the enchantment of the night, making it impossible for them to see the ghostly faces clearly. I don't know, Nietion replied, before his figure sprang into action. He lashed out with the seven despair demon's sword, and an enormous shadow of the sword appeared, striking at the dark murderous chi in the sky. However, the shadow of the sword was also engulfed by the dark murderous chi and was instantly devoured. Nietion's eyes flickered, and he could not help but exclaim. He did not expect the dark murderous chi to be so strange. Not only was it not afraid of his attacks, it was even able to devour his attacks. Nietion, those ghostly faces are formed by the runes of the enchantment. They are not alive. It's useless to attack them. At that moment, the ghost emperor's voice was heard. If you want to break the enchantment, you must find the eye of the enchantment. Nietion nodded, but his expression did not look good. He did not even know how big the enchantment of the night was. Trying to find the eye of the enchantment was like looking for a needle in a haystack.